Chapter 171 Witchcraft. Outside the ancient forbidden place, birds chirped, the mountains tranquil. Other than the earlier indistinct shouts and roars of battle from the mountain a distance away, there was no other noise. Gentle mountain breeze blew over from afar, the exuberant vegetation on the mountain swayed together, it looked not like a scene from the mortal world. Under the four bold big words of the illusory moon cave, the stone walls outside the primitive cave seemed to have wear off much, as if it had recorded the infinite number of times time had quietly passed through here. And right now, this stretch of wild countryside seemed to be silent, watching these two men facing each other. How much time over the years, quietly passed just like that, when one turned back, the good friends from the old days, how many are left? Lin Jingyu had been keeping quiet, but the expressions on his face constantly changed violently, only his eyes never left ghostly. That man standing silently before him. Was it still that Zhang Xiaofan? Finally, he spoke, his deep low voice with a trace of hoarseness, said, "Why did you kill him?" He was only an old man who was already in his late days. Ghostly's facial muscles seemed to twitch once, he raised his eyes and looked at Lin Jingyu, that playmate from his childhood, the veins on his face seemed to move, it could be seen that he was struggling to control his emotions, but such a fiery and forthright expression, it seemed to be his innate look. Just like, when he was young, he was already familiar with it. And right now, he stood there openly, under the sunlight, questioning himself. Deep inside the dense forest, there seemed to be a pair of dark eyes, coldly watching the two men's figures. Ghostly watched him for a long time, slowly said one sentence, "He obstructed my way." Lin Jingyu snorted and then he lifted his head to the sky, inhaled deeply, like he was speaking to himself deep inside his heart. The next moment, when he turned back, he had a cold expression. He stared deeply at Ghostly, looked at this once so familiar but right now so unfamiliar face, coldly said, "Since the terrible tragedy in Grass Temple Village, when we are the only survivors, I have always treated you like my brother, do you know?" Ghostly's lips moved, slowly nodded. Lin Jingyu stared at him, said, "In my heart, I have always thought, we are the closest, therefore even 10 years ago when you betrayed Qingyun, I have always hoped that one day you will realize your wrongs and mend your ways, return to good faction again." For the first time a dismal expression appeared on his face, but in this disappointment it indistinctly still revealed hatred, coldly smiled and said, "But, eventually I am still wrong, I should have realized it earlier, you are no longer that best brother Zhang Xiaofan, you are now already evil sect fearful figure, the merciless Ghostly." He laughed dismally, the expression on his face turned even more decisive, a sound of Changlang dragons singing, jade green light flared, Dragon Slayer sword, left its sheath, the sword energy like dragon, like a raging torrent, raging to devour someone, reflecting Lin Jingyu's young yet angry face, looking somehow savage. "Our past friendship, sever in half today." The resounding words were spoken resolutely. Following which a beam of jade green sword light tore apart this silence, from high up in the air slashed across the solid sturdy stone ground, a loud sound, ceasing only after a long time. After which, what was left was horizontally between the two of them, a deep sword scar on the stone slab. Ghostly's face suddenly changed, even his body for some reason, trembled, he stared hard at that deep scar on the ground, for the first time his face revealed a trace of anguish. That sword scar was so deep, carved into the solid stone, unable to be erased again. He looked at that scar, even Lin Jingyu's words, he seemed to take no notice. The deep sword scar, not long ago, he seemed to have seen it before. Almost at some time, someone he treasured in his heart, also cut off all relations, also such resolutely. Deep scar, deep scar, cut through the stone slab on the ground, severed all relations in the world but the one it hurt, whose heart was it. Almost like he couldn't breathe, Ghostly involuntarily panted heavily, even his body started to shake uncontrollably, but the next moment, he again took control over himself. The agitated expression on his face flashed past and never appeared again. He slowly lowered his head, secretly, clenched his teeth tight. Then, he lifted his head, looked at Lin Jingyu for a long time, clenched both of his hands into fists, his nails sinking deep into his flesh. But on his face, he smiled instead. Lin Jingyu became even more infuriated, said, "What are you laughing at?" Ghostly stared at him for a long time, softly said, "Realize wrongs and mend ways." He suddenly laughed loudly, his laughter mournful, said, "Yes, I am lost, indeed I couldn't find the way, but which way is the correct path, is it your path?" Lin Jingyu sternly said, "That's right, good faction is the correct path, you betrayed and abandoned the good faction that would be astray. Pei, Lin Jingyu's body shook, was stunned. Ghost Li's dismal look, lifted his head to the sky, angrily spat and said, who said that good faction is the correct way? Is it you? Even if it's what you said, good faction is the correct way, then what makes you think your Qingyun is definitely considered the good faction? Lin Jingyu frowned tightly, a murderous expression revealed on his face, coldly said, since you and I have already severed our relations, why bother with words? Ghost Li coldly looked at him, said, you want to kill me? Lin Jingyu sternly said, that old man is killed by you, these 10 years he had devotedly taught me, treated me like his son, I am indebted to him, like a father to me. He is killed by you and you are still unrepentable, I want to rid the people of an evil, seek revenge for him. Ghost Li sneered, said, there are many kinds of jackals and wolves in the world, actually it didn't mean anything but just that I have not fulfilled my wish and so definitely will not die. Lin Jingyu laughed a long laugh, full of disdain, the dragon slayer's sword lit up, he coldly said, enough with nonsense, our old scores over these 10 years, settle it today. Ghost Li humphed, dim dark green light lit up from his right hand, that firestick glowed with dark light, quietly flew up. Birds chirped lightly, the mountain felt even more tranquil, the lush green mountain, clear breeze lightly blew, under the boundless sky, before the 1,000-years-old ancient cave, the two childhood friends, coldly facing each other, about to do a life-and-death battle. And at this time, suddenly, behind them, a deep rumble was heard from that illusory moon cave, the surroundings started to shake, both of them changed countenance. Before they could react, from that ancient cave, a purple gas flashed past, instantly that purple gas leapt up, shrouded the cave opening, the clouds surged, among it thunder rumbled, the purple gas like a column, charged straight up to the clouds. Leaving the two of them before this heaven and earth spectacle, right now looking extremely insignificant, their clothes flapped in the wind, again staring at each other coldly. The wind was whistling, passing Tongtian Peak, imposing and solemn, but not only it was an absolute silence over at good faction side, even that black pressing stretch of demon beasts ahead, seemed to sense something, also quietened down, looked up. Standing above the white skeleton monster's skull, the brightly colored silk clothings of the beast deity gently fluttered in the wind, a youthful appearance but his eyes showed a timeless gaze, also looking at that gradually emerging huge sword formation in the sky. The majestic purple air, first soared up from back of the Qingyun Hill Tongtian Peak, its speed like lightning, its momentum unparalleled, charging up to the sky, like an enormous purple pillar supporting heaven and earth, suddenly appeared in this vast world. The purple air rose, turbulently and finally landed on that rock yet not like rock Zhu Xian ancient sword. That moment, Zhu Xian ancient sword lighted up, even from a far distance, the innumerable humans, could sense high up in the sky, on that ancient sword, there seemed to be something, moving slightly, like slowly awakening from a deep slumber. On the ancient sword, brilliant light released, reflecting Reverend Daoshuan's face. His dark green robes rose without wind, making flapping sounds, his right hand holding the sword, his face solemn, his left hand fingers held a sword gesture tightly, between heaven and earth his low voice was heard, like Sanskrit chanting, like a strange incantation, reverberating far and wide. Suddenly, his left hand sword gesture moved, piercing the horizon, almost at the same time, the other 6 lofty mountain summits of Qingyun mountain ranges, 6 rays of light rose up, like a long rainbow running through the horizon, broke through and arrived, streaking a long trajectory across the firmament and finally also landed on that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Instantly, the Zhu Xian ancient sword was enveloped in an extremely dazzling radiance, like the rising sun descended upon the mortal world. Unable to look at it, the resplendent light burst forth from the ancient sword, immediately that mass of dark air which was hovering in the horizon was chased completely away. In the resplendent light, 7 color lights merged into one, rose up from that mass of brilliant white light, in the sky, transformed into an enormous 7-colored sword, flowing with color and light. Following which, that colorful main sword with the ceaseless pouring of the 7 mountain summits' spiritual energies, started to become larger and during the process, different single-colored energy small spiritual swords separated from it, increasing in number, started to spread thickly over the sky. On the ground, a burst of cheers was heard from the onlookers, numerous young disciples, regardless or not whether they were from Qingyun sect, all revealed awe and revered expressions, looking up at that almost mythology majestic sword formation in the horizon. And many of those who had experienced the Qingyun turmoil 10 years ago, right now had mixed feelings, some rejoiced, some silent. Among the crowd, the surrounding young disciples smiled and laughed, Lu Shuiqi silently looked up at that resplendent, imposing Zhu Xian sword formation. The rays of light, reflecting down from the sky, enveloped everyone including her in it, reflecting her face bright. Just that, on her beautiful cold face, there was no expression, only in her pair of bright eyes, reflected that seven colors light, dimly, flashed with a different kind of feeling, but eventually nobody could see what was deep in her heart. 10 years of time, without realizing, quietly passed by like that. Who would still remember that heart-wrenching cry at Qingyun Hill? Who would still remember that young man who sank into despair? Lu Shuiqi's body trembled, suddenly seemed to recall something unbearable, even the expression on her face also dimmed down. Subconsciously she held Tianya's celestial sword tighter in her hand. The sky full of sword figures became more and more dense, numerous brilliant lights covered the entire sky. In the beast deity's eyes, reflected the entire sky infinite swords. Looking at it for a long time, he nodded, his face solemn, sighed and said, "It is really the work of the gods. Didn't expect that there is such an unparalleled figure in Central Plains, able to gather the spiritual energies of the mountains and create such an exceptional sword formation. It is really amazing." He clapped and praised, said 3 times in succession, "Amazing. Amazing. Amazing." Although he sang praises, but his face did not show the slightest fear, or should say, nobody knew, someone like him, a human but not like human, like those ghost demons, would he feel fear and dread. In the stormy situation, the enormous monster made a low growl, slowly rose up and hovered in the air, facing that water Kirin and Reverend Daozan standing on its back. The violent wind blew past, the sky silent. The humans and beasts racket below suddenly seemed to be very far away, leaving only the two of them facing each other. The vast heaven and earth yet seemed narrow and cramped, seemed unable to accommodate 2 people. Both of them looked at each other. Reverend Daozan coldly said, "Under Zhu Xian's sword, demons and ghosts have never been able to survive. If you are smart, surrender now, incarcerate yourself for a lifetime at Qingyun and I will spare your life." Beast deity was stunned and then laughed out, did not mind, only shook his head slightly, his face showed a few signs of ridicule. Reverend Daozan saw it, did not speak any more, breathed deeply, his right hand held the sword tightly, his left hand suddenly waved, the sky full of dense swords. Suddenly an orange spiritual sword left the crowd, pierced through the sky with a sharp whistle, shot towards Beast deity. Beast deity was solemn, but his eyes stared intently on the sword that was flying towards him. This orange sword flew like lightning, in a blink was already less than 1 jong before him. Beast deity suddenly raised his left hand, 5 fingers spread towards the direction of the sword. In the midair, black gas appeared out of thin air, 1 jong before the beast deity, instantly solidified and formed a black shield wall, top square bottom sharp, blocked before the orange-colored small sword. A moment later, the orange sword collided onto the black shield. Heaven and earth, in that instant, still that silent. Rumble. Following, like the rising run leaping out of the water surface, a thunderous rumble immediately erupted, and in the black air orange light, few lightnings flashed and then slowly receded. These 2 objects were both formless gas objects, but as if like the world's most sturdy treasures both shook hard, the entire firmament and earth, shrouded in the deafening rumble. The invisible sound waves, strong winds following, Qingyun Hill summit, everyone's ears were ringing, their countenances changed. Although the people already knew the 2 of them were highly skilled figures, but from that exchange earlier, it looked like an ordinary testing of skills, yet actually had such a powerful impact. It was really unexpected. At the same time, the final outcome of this battle would be even unpredictable. There were even some who already thought, after this calamity, under such intensive and fierce fight, what would be the outcome of Qingyun Hill? In the air, Reverend Daozan and the beast deity faced each other, both expressionless, couldn't tell if there was any sign of surprise or shock emotions. Under the dazzling colorful spiritual sword sky, the beast deity was shrouded in a mass of black air, looking especially glaring. After a long time, Reverend Daozan slightly snorted, his left hand sword gesture signaled, his robes danced, against that resplendent ancient sword Zhu Xian in his hand, which flashed for a moment. In the firmament, suddenly violent wind came from all directions, the sky of sword images, half of the swords in the horizon suddenly swayed. For a moment, brilliant lights and vibrant colors in the horizon, extremely awe-inspiring, almost unable to view directly. The beast deity's countenance changed, focused to meet it. As expected, the next moment, starting from the back of Reverend Daozan, several colorful swords had already turned, trembling and shaking in the sky, targeting the beast deity. The cold energy instantly surged and raged. the next moment, half of the swords in the sky, at one glance unable to tell the exact numbers, all seemed to be manipulated by an invisible force, slowly turning over. Between heaven and earth, an austere atmosphere. But before the people could react, the ancient sword in Reverend Daoshuan's hand had already exploded with light. At the same time, like an angry tide erupting, the raging waves hit the shore. The 100 over single-colored spiritual swords in the formation formed a long and wide 7-jong huge sword rain, pounded down with a rumble. The sky rang with piercing sharp whistles. Suo suo sounds reverberated between heaven and earth. The beast deity watched the sword rain approaching. With a loud shout, the enormous monster below his feet at the same time howled long to the sky, its cry extremely mournful. However, both of his hands opened wide and closed, his body moved, making weird movements, even from afar. For some reason, everyone on Tongtian Peak at the same time heard an extremely odd desolate song. That song was completely different from Central Plains, desolate and forceful, like a wild huge beast howling to the night sky in the storm. There was even an endless whistling feeling. Following the deep ancient music, accompanying it with sonorous and rhythmic strange drum beats, the black air around the beast deity suddenly soared up. Black like ink, in the violent wind rapidly circulated, like a black dragon brandishing its claws, imposingly watching the world. Chapter 172 Evil Beast. No sooner said than done. That overwhelming rain of swords had already arrived before the beast deity, the strong winds creating a biting pain on the face. And at this flint spark moment, the beast deity's figure was suddenly concealed, vanished in the cloud mass of black gas. Instead, that ferocious spiritual huge beast beneath it surged with black gas, suddenly leapt up, its skeleton making cracking sounds. Surrounded by the cloud of black gas, it looked even more terrible. That terrible monster roared to the sky. At that instant the sky changed, sands and stones blew and rolled away from the ground, almost no one could stand straight. In the chaotic scene, the black gas surged and rolled, merged with that monster, in a blink expanded more than 3 times, several streams of black gases emerged out from its white skeleton, danced in the air like tentacles. By now the Zhu Xian sword rain had already arrived. The 1,000 swords were no ordinary formation. The black gases rushed up. Before it could reach it, instantly it was dispersed completely by the sword's energies, leaving not even a trace, charged down and headed straight to that savage monster. That ferocious monster roared incessantly, the strange howls again and again. This batch of extremely sharp swords looked like it would soon hit the huge monster. Suddenly those several tentacles like alive, flew up and met the swords. The black gases covered the clouds and hid the sun, blocking the sword rain. The Zhu Xian swords in a blink met it. However, those black gases like tentacles were definitely not like the surrounding black gas, but yet not like the initial tough and sturdy gases wielded by the beast deity. The 100 over spiritual swords charged down, those tentacles as if alive, wrapped around, gradually slowing down the momentum. Even the sword's brilliance slowly dimmed, gradually losing its shine. However, Zhu Xian swords were after all not ordinary, although it was formed by invisible energies. In order to dissolve these swords, the surrounding black gases tentacles evidently were also wounded by those celestial energies. Huge amount of vapors rose from that ferocious monster's body. Black gases poured out endlessly, in a blink filled up the front. In not a short while, these 100 over Zhu Xian spiritual swords were inconceivably dissolved away. Qing Yunhill Tong Tian Peak, absolute silence, like a dead silence. In the midair, Reverend Dao Zan looked even more grave, but there was no fear. His celestial-like figure towered aloft at the top of the clouds, his hand holding the brilliant shining Zhu Xian ancient sword, looking like an ancient celestial deity. But he only sneered, his right hand holding the sword towards the sky, slowly waved, following which the ancient sword's brilliance dazzled. Thunder indistinctly started to rumble in the sky. The entire sky rumbled. The powerful Zhu Xian sword formation started to turn together, especially that 7-colored main sword was even more resplendent, unable to view it directly. In the white light, from the ancient sword Zhu Xian, suddenly purple air leapt up and charged to the sky, directly entered into the sword formation. Instantly within 10 jong the purple gas spiritual swords gathered together. Closely following, the other 6 brilliant lights one by one leapt up, magnificent and dazzling, flying into the sky, immediately formed a 7-star position within Zhu Xian sword formation, each an enormous single-colored sword formation, majestic and awe-inspiring. The winds and clouds whistled, the violent sound of the winds. A shock of thunder suddenly in the silence, a loud crash, like the hearts of 1,000 people in shock. The swords' brilliance flowed in the horizon, colorful lights dazzled, numerous colorful swords streaked past the horizon, charged down with sharp whistling. Like an angry tide in the sky, surged forward, the purple gas leading. At one glance it looked endless, even much more powerful than the previous force. And behind the purple gas, every 10 zhang, single-colored spiritual swords converged, whistling and surging, turbulent and raging, not what a human could imagine. Looking at this almost Armageddon-like scene, not one did not change countenance, their palms breaking out in sweat. Mixing in this deafening thunder and sharp whistling sounds, the ancient song slowly submerged, even those strange drum beats, had long disappeared. But that huge monster, facing such frightening furious billows of the sword rain, it was still brazen. In the rising black gases, it howled sharply, like provoking the sky, extremely arrogant and obstinate. In a blink the sword's light pounced onto its body. Several black gases tentacles immediately rushed up. In spite of the fact that this sword energy was already incomparable to the previous attack, but the southern crude ancient witchcraft had a strange unfathomable deity ghost ability, the black tentacles became more daring as it battled, although it was pierced 1,000 holes and openings by the innumerable sword energies in an instant, but the endless black gas immediately was filled up, the largest limit was actually extended several zhang more. Just that this wave of purple spiritual swords charging into the black gas forcibly suppressed the black gas, but the next moment, the black gas had already countered, leapt up, swallowed the spiritual swords one by one. Even it was so, before the black gas could resume its original form, the second wave of sword formation had already arrived. The multifarious scene, boundless piercing light, in the firmament the swords light like rain like locust, dense and thick, and with Reverend Daoxuan's power manipulation, Zhu Xian ancient sword turned more and more resplendent. In the midair the seven-colored main sword continued to split out more and more single-colored spiritual swords, the speed increasing and increasing, waves and waves of soul-stirring huge sword formations, with a loud rumble struck down that mass of black air. Under such brazenly attack by this Zhu Xian formation like angry tide, the black gas was unable to regain its initial arrogant look, gradually starting from 10 zhang radius, gradually being shrunken facing waves of even stronger waves, the turbulent swords light almost like infinite and giving a feeling of hopelessness, the black gas gradually was unable to sustain. The enormous ferocious monster still roaring incessantly, but the surrounding black gas had gradually became weaker, every wave came nearer to it, the black gas gradually became thin, the strange tentacles also gradually weaker, struggled to resist that sky of sword rain. Unknown since when, after a period of long silence, the crowd below broke out in waves of cheers. The last 6 tentacles, after with effort resisted that wave of green sword, finally dispersed and disappeared, in the air, leaving only that huge monster. Heaven and earth solemn, spiritual swords marched over unhindered. Indistinct ancient song, vast and boundless wilderness. Like a shock of thunder, like a flash of lightning, infinite swords raised descended from the sky, pouring over from all directions, piercing through that huge monster in the sky. The huge white skeleton instantly splitted, numerous black blood fluid sprayed out, the monster abruptly lifted its head, made a heart-wrenching cry to the firmament. The winds ceased and the clouds dispersed. The sword rain ceased. 10,000 eyes watching, the huge ferocious body, every inch of flesh and bones, seemed to be trembling, watching carefully, twinkling with numerous tiny swords, stabbed everywhere, from head to tail, from top to bottom, there was not a place where it was whole. The people on Tongtian Peak sucked in a breath of cold air, for some reason, felt a sensation of pricks at their backs. Just that monster was still not dead, the head stabbed full of Zhu Xian numerous swords, slowly turned around, looked at its body full of holes and slowly lowered its head. For some reason its voice was not that mournful and ferocious, right now it was extremely deep, looked reluctant and even more in pain. The giant mouth opened and closed, 2 red glints flashed past its eyes, like fire flames, burning strongly but eventually soon after that, shattered and disappeared. The next moment, in the mid-air, from the huge monster's body a loud sound burst forth, resounded between heaven and earth, numerous swords flew backwards, even that sword formation in the firmament also had a wave of disorder. Then, that once mighty huge ferocious monster, as if it suddenly become extremely fragile, the violent wind blew past, the indestructible skeletal body, like sands and stones, collapsed finally, white bones to sand, flesh to stones, scattered with the wind. The crowd silently stared at the horizon. When victory was in sight, no one cheered, as if there was a layer of strange feeling enveloped everyone's heart. In the sky, that once huge body seemed almost completely dispersed with the wind. Suddenly a cry was heard from below, following which everyone started to cry out. In the monster's body, although the flesh and bones were completely dissolved, but there was still a mass of black gas, slowly rotating in the air. the next moment, when the monster was finally completely destroyed, and that mass of black gas slowly dispersed, revealed a sight. It was a young man body, indeed it was the beast deity who had disappeared. However, the beast deity right now was not that cool and composed as before, instead he cut a sorry figure, especially that gorgeous set of silk clothes, right now was full of holes, blew once at by the strong winds, turned to ashes in the sky. Right now he was naked, but on his face, there was no fear or disappointment, on the contrary, his eyes was staring ahead at that majestic vast sword formation, suddenly smiled, stretched his body, his entire body hovering in the air, clapped and said, "Admirable, admirable." Reverend Daoshuan's countenance changed. Apparently he did not expect that the beast deity was such a difficult foe, facing such powers, and he could still resist, and at one glance, he only looked slightly pale and tired, on his body, not a single wound. Below, suddenly a commotion. Many of the female disciples at Qingyun Hill right now realized with a start, their faces red, did not dare to look at the sky again. Instead at the horizon, although the beast deity was naked, but he did not seem to care, as if he was like that since the beginning of heaven and earth, behaving like nothing had happened, only stared intently like that ancient sword in Reverend Daoshuan's hand. Reverend Daozan sneered, said, "If you surrender now and promise to incapacitate your skills yourself, at Qingyun Rear Mountain Illusory Moon Cave recultivate and progress to good, I can spare your life. Otherwise, under Zhu Xian's sword, will not let you such a menacing threat live." Having said that, he held the Zhu Xian ancient sword, gently waved, immediately the swords in the sky seemed to sense it, wavered together, a commanding presence. But at this moment, a trace of pain flashed past Reverend Daoshuan's face, although it was just for a moment, but the beast deity had already caught it. The beast deity hovered in the air, his eyes ablaze with a strange glint, a trace of smile revealed on his lips, lightly said, "Like this kind of extreme savage celestial sword, in addition with the spiritual energy from the green mountains below, you actually are able to sustain until now and yet still not exhausted. It is really incomparable to ordinary person." Reverend Daozan frowned, in a deep voice asked, "What do you mean by these words?" The beast deity laughed and did not answer, only shook his head, said, "The ferocious spirit of the ancient sword, must definitely be created out of heaven and earth. Vicious currents, came from the same source as me, how would I not know? You forcefully wield the sword in battle with me, the outcome still unknown, but mostly taking advantage of the sword energies, harming others and yourself like that. You are not an ordinary folk, why do you still need me to elaborate further?" He, speaking until here, the beast deity coldly laughed twice, again said, "I advise you to abandon the sword early, otherwise later on the sword backlash, I'm afraid your outcome will even be thousands and 10,000s times more tragic than me." Reverend Daozan stared at the beast deity for a long time, suddenly shook his head and laughed loudly, his eyes full of disdain, said, "Evil spirits and demonic heretical ways, how would you know our Taoist school benevolent heart? And furthermore our Taoist school true way, supreme celestial sword, how will it be what your ravings are?" He made a clear whistle, at where his arm was raised, the entire sky of swords quivered, imposing said, "Evildoer, receive death." The beast deity sneered, the glint in his eyes burned like fire, eagerly said, "Good, today we'll let you see the power of our southern border witchcraft." He had just spoke, black gas already formed, from his skin, suddenly flashed with black air, the next moment his fair skin had turned totally black like ink, and under the skin, it started trembling, countless tiny lumps rose, like alive, started to shake unceasingly. In an unknown far place, the open vast wilderness, suddenly an extremely low, dong-dong, strange sound was heard, like a human heartbeat, extremely weird. In the far horizon, outside Zhu Xian's sword formation brilliance 10,000s jong away, the sky suddenly darkened, the dark clouds rolled over from all directions with rapid speed, quickly gathered beside the beast deity. Reverend Daozan looked grave, his entire self alert and prepared, stared at the strange changes in front of him. In the hovering black gases, the deep strange sounds which seemed to come from the spiritual 9 netherworlds traveled faster and faster, denser and denser, made one involuntarily felt as if their own heartbeat also increased in speed, faster and faster, until in the end it felt almost going to burst. A few lower skilled good faction disciples actually could not take it, fell and sat on the ground, used their internal energies and struggled to resist. And in the air, as the black gas turned thicker and thicker, suddenly, a deep low roar, like a creature growl, and yet like an insect breaking out of its cocoon, everyone could see it clearly, on that black beast deity's body, from the left arm, the skin burst, from the countless small bumps that shook incessantly, slowly extended out something, with fingers and hand. It was actually another arm, and on this new arm, strong sturdy bones, far bigger than the body's own arm. Couldn't imagine how this could stretch out from the original arm. However, this was just the beginning. Following the sounds of deep bursting, every part of the beast deity's body seemed to explode out, and from there different kinds of huge body parts appeared. And before long, from these new body parts, again burst opened, again grew new and even bigger body limbs. The people on Tong Tien Peak were struck dumb with shock, looked at each other. Such bizarre unnatural black art, not only they had never seen, they had not even heard of it. Thousands and thousands of years in Central Plains, in countless of ancient books and records, never had anyone recorded such shocking black art. Right now Reverend Dao Zan also couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, stunned to see the beast deity who looked like an ordinary young man, at the moment constantly expanding, until finally when he stopped splitting, towering in front of Reverend Dao Zan, facing Zhu Xian formation, was already as high as 10 Zhong, 1,000 hands 100 heads monster. Tong Tien Peak Mountain Rear, illusory moon cave boundary. The purple column that had rose from the cave was still the same, without any sign of faltering. Looking at it from afar, that column looked like it was solid. Propitious vapors rose, solemn and dignified. And in the sky at the moment, covered more than half by Zhu Xian's sword formation, even separated from a far distance, Ghostly and Lin Jingyu both could feel the surging turbulent celestial power of Zhu Xian in the horizon. Restraining the trembling dragon slayer's sword in his hand, Lin Jingyu looked away from the sky, shocked by the power and might of the ancient Zhu Xian. At the same time his emotions also had a slight change. Just now, he and Ghostly seemed to at the tip of a life and death fight. This Zhu Xian sword formation started suddenly, a majestic scene, immediately stunned both of them. The two like-mindedly stopped. And to say it actually, very likely the person standing in front of him, would be feeling even more complicated, right? Lin Jingyu, for some reason, this thought flashed past his mind, turned and looked at Ghostly. That man, who looked to have gone through the vicissitudes of life, quietly looking at the sky, that brilliant, soul-stirring majestic scene. Heaven and earth quietly turned silent. The sound of wind from somewhere far seemed to blow over, the voice many years ago, and deep inside the mind, reverberated countless of times the past 10 years, heartbroken each time the scene was revisited. Ding, ding, bell. Faintly, like the wind bells gently swaying in the breeze, who glanced back and smiled in the sounds of bell, that once light green figure and gentle body with warmth, that little bit of remaining warmth. God knows those past few years, how many desolate nights it had warmed him. The chill from the recesses, from the heart coldly surfaced, gushed up into the heart, chilled the heart, made the body cold, from the fingers to deep in the heart, like it could never feel another trace of pain, yet suddenly discovered that time had already transformed into a sharp knife, constantly cutting. But blood was not seen. Bai Yao, he lightly spoke, for some reason his body started to tremble. In his eyes, reflected those 10,000 brilliant lights from the swords, almost not a mortal world scene. That numerous disarray galloping swords light, every ray that unrestrained and confident, all vivid in his mind, reminding him the memories of the past. That green figure, as if standing beside him, like 10 years ago, facing everyone, never retreating, never once regret. Hoo-ah! Ghostly howled to the sky, both of his eyes wide opened, two hands clenched into fists, made a deep low gee sound. As if sensing its owner's indignation, the soul devouring slowly flew up, its dark black body, thin lines of dark red like blood vessels one by one lit up, reflected in Ghostly's eyes, gradually dyed both of his eyes red. Crisp cry of the sword, alerted him. Ghostly slowly turned around, a pair of blood-red eyes, saw Lin Jingyu's sneer and disdain expression. You are really beyond hope. Lin Jingyu resolutely said, I should have known, you have degenerate into the evil faction and it is hard for you to come back. Unfortunately I still care about our former friendship, hope that you will come back. Forget it, today on this Qingyun Hill, let's make a clean break. Ghostly watched him for a long time, suddenly laughed out loud, his laughter gradually turning wilder, full of arrogance and disdain. Lin Jingyu was furious, with an angry shout, made a sword gesture, immediately jade green light shone brightly, Dragon Slayer's sword's light seemed to transform into a greenish-blue dragon, rising into the air. At that instant, violent winds started in front of the cave. Lin Jingyu holding the celestial sword flew up, his white clothes flapped, dashing and confident, like a giant among men, emerged out in the world floating. Just that at that moment, the murderous look in his eyes, seemed to surpass Ghostly. Flying up, Dragon Slayer's sword had already slashed down, although separated by a distance, but the sword ray streaked over, like a green dragon, its force impossible to resist, lashing out a deep groove on the ground, straight to Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee, still that wild and slightly savage look, watching the jade green ray bursting over, suddenly his body like a ghost, instantly disappear. The Dragon Slayer's sword ray cut down, hit it where Ghost Lee was standing previous, immediately the sturdy stone slab on the ground broke apart into 4 or 5 pieces, a big pit carved out. The next moment, Ghost Lee suddenly appeared one jong before Lin Jingyu, the soul-devouring stick flew out, red light flashing, flying with a whistling sound, the strong wind assaulting the face, also without any mercy. Lin Jingyu was shocked but calm, his body suddenly leapt up, avoided the thousands-pounds force, turning back wielding his sword he was already charging over. Ghost Lee made a long laugh, did not avoid and headed straight, the soul-devouring like lightning had flew back to his hand, heading towards Lin Jingyu. The two childhood playmates, glaring at each other like that, fighting till life and death. Like an arrow leaving the bow, collided in midair. Instantly, violent winds abruptly gathered, with the two persons as the center, invisible sound waves rippled out, uprooted the trees nearby, flying backwards. And in the center of the storm, the two persons' faces at the same time flashed with a trace of pain, an indistinct gold ray flitted past Ghost Lee's face. This fight, which happened at the rear of Tong Tien Peak, following the winds brushing past the lofty ridges and towering mountains, over a far distance, it was already inaudible. Moreover, right now in the mortal world sky, the living things in the world, who would still care about them? In the sky, there was still an even more important battle. Just that, among the crowd, for some reason, Lu Shuiqi suddenly was shocked. Strangely, a faint gold light flashed past her face. She turned back stunned, her body stiff, gazing far. In that far distance, it was that secluded remote mountain rear. Chapter 173 Celestial Sword. In the midair, Reverend Dao Zan frowning tightly, facing that, as if from the 9 netherworlds ferocious ghost, beast deity, not only him, all of the good faction people below, every one of them was also staring in shock. That monster in the air, its entire body as black as ink, the muscles on the colossal body bulged, numerous thick sturdy limbs extended out from the body, at a quick glance, not less than several hundreds, including the head and face which had deformed due to the witchcraft. It was even more savage and terrible. It was really an evil beast which never had been seen ever since heaven and earth formed. After a period of silence, a stir of commotion and hubbub started from the human crowd. Other than being utterly shocked, many more had actually expected. With this kind of southern border barbarians, naturally were the extremely vicious and evil type. This person before them looked not like human nor ghost, neither evil or devil monster. How would it be an innate thing from the world? In the midair, Reverend Dao Zan took a deep breath, unhurriedly placed Zhu Xian ancient sword horizontally before his chest. The dazzling white light continued to pour out from the ancient sword, not only shrouded the sword in it, even Reverend Dao Xuan's entire right arm was also enveloped. Looking from the outside, right now the horizon was full of swords images, the sword formation a commanding presence. Reverend Dao Zan looked even more like an immortal, but for some reason, under his celestial appearance, his face started to look pale. Evildoer, Reverend Dao Xuan's voice was like the peals of a deep bell, his tone deep, rumbling off. Compared to previously, it was more austere. You still have not come to realize the truth, are you waiting to be caught? The thousands hands monster that the beast deity had transformed to, obviously did not give any weight to Reverend Dao Xuan's words, and after transforming, his voice also changed. It became hoarse and grating, as if a torn sandpaper sharpening a steel knife, sneered and said, waiting to be caught. Hee, later I will first skin you alive, then disembowel those useless things below and dig out their hearts, send them to meet you at Hades. How about it? Reverend Dao Xuan's baleful energy between his brows flashed, without bothering with more words. Where his sword gesture moved, immediately the sky full of swords danced. Zhu Xian's sword formation was activated once again. Although that monster's words were wildly arrogant, but facing this unparalleled once 1,000 years sword formation, naturally would not dare to be negligent, focused and prepared to fight. But a sonorous golden drum suddenly resounded, from far to near, out of nowhere boomed, the 7-colored radiant lights from the ancient sword leapt up, directly entered into the sword formation. Immediately the extraordinary lights in the sky flashed, the swords laid horizontally, instantly again formed 7 huge single-colored sword formations, like before, facing that transformed monster. From the beast deity's mouth it issued a low deep growl. Black gas circulated on the surface of its huge body, like ink. Hundreds of strange arms either opened or closed, facing the imminent storm. Reverend Dao Zan with a long whistle, like a mountain eagle charging up to the sky, straight up to the clouds, where the sound reaches, white light exploded, Zhu Xian swayed, the enormous sword formation moved with a rumble, the single-colored sword slowly turned over, aimed at the beast deity. After a moment, the sky which had been quiet for a long time, again Tsuo, a piercing sound rang out, closely following it, blotting out the sky and covering the earth, was all sharp piercing sounds. Numerous Zhu Xian swords streaked past the horizon incessantly, carrying immense malevolent energy and murderous intention, charging towards the beast deity. In a twinkling of an eye, the first wave of purple sword formation had already rushed to the front. The beast deity huge body looked to be this innumerable swords live target soon. However, when the numerous Qing Yunhil good faction disciples were about to rejoice, the hundred strange long arms on the beast deity's body flew and danced, every arm gathered thick black gas, looking almost like a huge black cloud, rose to meet the sky. In an instant, hundreds of swords stabbed down and the beast deity's hundreds of strange hands were like apparitions, swiftly danced in the air, facing those almost indestructible swords. Those black hands were not the least afraid. In a moment, the first wave of purple swords were either caught or hit, either wrapped around or removed, all of the swords were received. In the black gas, those swords soon lost their color and quickly dissipated away. The countless people were dumbfounded. For thousands of years, this was the first person that could face and fight the Zhu Xian sword formation. Just that, in the constantly changing situation, it did not allow one to have the time to think about these extra stuffs. Like the long river angry waves, billows turbulent, the huge colorful main sword continued to produce countless of small swords, and even more under the Zhu Xian sword and Reverend Daoshuan's manipulation, turned into an infinite sword rain and rained down, every sword carrying the Zhu Xian murderous energy, wave after wave, like thunder rumbling, like lightning flashing, pouncing towards the beast deity. The beast deity roared incessantly to the sky, the deafening sound reverberated in the clouds. Right now he was like facing the heaven's celestial spirits, fighting against the sky. The strange hundreds arms, wielded in the clouds, the black gas surging, layers of layers, responding to the sharp cries that filled up the sky. One wave, and another, the hundreds thousands swords were like endless, pouring down, but looking at the beast deity's huge body, it seemed to be a transformed devil, never a moment of tiredness. These two figures, whom were both at the peak of their cultivation, fought wildly at this Qing Yunhil. Just that, there was after all a limit to human strength. A wave, and another wave. Until the 49th wave of swords poured down, the 7 colors sword formations had completed 7 turns. Standing at the summit of the storm, Reverend Dao Zan was pale, even his right hand which was holding the ancient sword Zhu Xian, wrapped by the white light, indistinctly started to tremble. And ahead, the beast deity looked even more sorry. After going through this wild storm of sword formation like baptism, the original majestic hundreds over strange arms, more than half had already been destroyed, and the initial thick black gas looked to have thinned down much. Just that when he received the last wave of swords, his savage look turned more hideous. He did not lose morale but instead became even more high-spirited. A sound of hoarse weird laughter, like an evil ghost growl, broke out. At the moment, the crowd was silent, everyone had turned pale. That soul-shocking culmination of the fights stunned everyone and made one unable to contain oneself. Just that one never imagined, that unparalleled Zhu Xian sword formation, still could not subdue this exceptional evil beast. Could it be, that this catastrophe was really inevitable? The beast deity laughed to the sky, his huge body inconceivably leapt up, pounced towards Reverend Dao Zan. Suddenly, between heaven and on earth, cries of alarm. Only Reverend Dao Zan was shocked but calm, took a deep breath, a soft shout, the water Kirin below him immediately moved back. Unexpectedly, although the beast deity's body was colossal but its speed was as fast as lightning, in a blink of an eye it had already pounced ahead. Instantly black gas surged, not knowing how many huge arms grabbed over. At this critical juncture, Reverend Daoshuan's Zhu Xian ancient sword abruptly hung upside down, a face which was pale immediately flushed red but turned pale again, repeated swiftly 3 times like that. The ancient sword Zhu Xian exploded with light, like a long whale water sucking in water, instantly sucked all of the swords in the sky, horizontal before Reverend Dao Zan, condensed into a colorful sword wall. The beast deity's countenance changed but it was too late to retreat. Poo 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 gee ka ka, loud sounds were heard in the firmament. In that moment the black gas scattered, not knowing how many strange hands were annihilated. Reverend Dao Zan was seen turning danger to safety and at the same time also wounded the beast deity heavily. Qing Yunhil countless of disciples, moods changed from greatly shocked to overjoyed, cheering and jumping for joy. Unexpectedly before their cheers stopped, On that brilliant sword wall which annihilated numerous strange arms and black gas, but just that the thickest and sturdiest black arm, where the black gas was especially thick and heavy, forced its way through and with one palm, hit onto Reverend Daoxuan's chest. Reverend Daozan, like being hit with lightning, his body shook, together with the water Kirin howling to the sky. One man and one beast flew backwards heavily, until a distance of several jongs, they then stopped. And the people at the foot of the mountain clearly saw this push. Reverend Daoxuan's dark green robe immediately tore into pieces, bright red blood spurted out from his mouth, drops and bits seemed to land onto the ancient sword, dotted dark red lights among the white light, and then gradually disappear. Below heaven and earth, immediately a deathly silence. The Zhu Xian sword formation in the horizon seemed to be also affected, a wave of shakes and sways, the sky full of swords shook ceaselessly but eventually became still. It could be that because the true ways suffered damage, the initial overwhelming Zhu Xian sword formation, right now its boundary was reduced to more than half of its original size. An ominous premonition seemed to envelope everyone's heart. Wiping away the blood stains on his lips, Reverend Daozan looked at his palm, blood stains flowed onto his hand. He watched for a long time and then slowly looked ahead. Right now the sword energy, dark clouds had all completely dissipated, the beast deity in front of him was watching him like a tiger eyeing its prey, but looking at him, although the beast deity had injured him but he himself was no better. The arms which were reduced to less than half of its original number, in a blink had again suffered heavy losses and annihilated half by the Zhu Xian sword. Looking at it now, only several were left, but those remnants were the most powerful ones, completely different from the other arms. And the beast deity itself, his face which was shrouded in black gas, right now seemed to be slightly pale, but the battle mood on his face, like the most ferocious beast, turned stronger in defeat, did not have the slightest intention to give up. The corner of Reverend Daoxuan's mouth twitched, seemed to be smiling bitterly, but this slight action seemed to also affect his injury. His body swayed a few times, causing the crowd below to cry out. But fortunately he only swayed a few times and then stood firm. However, right now his vulnerability was evident. The beast deity ahead of him sneered with caw-caw sounds, in a deep low voice said, "How is it, ignorant humans like you all, even though with such supreme celestial object, it is still an outcome like this? Before it is too late, you better kill yourself." Reverend Daozan silently looked up, facing the firmament. The Zhu Xian ancient sword's light reflected his face. Suddenly there was a different demeanor. Qing Yun sect ancestors, Reverend Daozan suddenly spoke, but the words, the intonation was deep and slightly with pain. Disciple Daozan is unworthy, unable to subdue the evil demon, implicating the common people. The catastrophe is imminent. For the survival of the common people, disciple has no choice but to violate the prohibition. Hope that ancestors will still bless, eliminate the evil and subdue the devil. Even though disciple will be consigned to eternal damnation, disciple is also willing to bear. His voice was light, not many could hear it. Everyone saw him mumbling, his expression seemed to be grieved. The crowd was perplexed, not knowing what Reverend Daozan was doing. Just that a moment later, suddenly in the midair, Reverend Daozan glared, sternly and imposing. His left-hand sword gesture suddenly led straight towards that Zhu Xian ancient sword in front of his chest. White light shone, suddenly red beam flashed. Reverend Daoxuan's left hand was seen entering into the white light. When it emerged again, blood was spilled, but his face, although looked pale, but there was not a trace of pain. His left hand with a quick stroke, in the air with fast speed, drew out a strange picture, and the blood dripping from his fingers did not drop down, instead accompanying his hand's movements, coagulated in midair, materializing to life. A red, blood taiji picture. Dark red blood started to swiftly flow on the diagram, becoming brighter and brighter, like a red jade, and the taiji diagram itself also began to rotate with speed. Reverend Daozan looked more and more pale, at the same time that Zhu Xian's sword shrouded in white light in his hand started to tremble, as if this celestial sword within this hilt seemed to be disturbed by something, desiring something. That taiji diagram turned faster and faster, slowly rose, arrived at 3 kai before Reverend Daozan. Reverend Daozan right now looked extremely pale, as if his entire body's vitality was being sucked into the diagram, but he still used the last bit of strength, held the ancient sword up, suddenly stabbed with force, penetrated this bloody taiji diagram. At the same time, he shouted with a loud shout, "Heaven! Secret! Seal!" Each time he shouted a word, the heaven and earth in the reverberation, in the windless clear sky, a shock of thunder impressively accompanied it, earth-shakingly, a wave of imposing great force, descended from the sky, formless yet with substance, penetrating from the top in. Where the violent wind began, on his body, pong, pong, pong like explosions, with his 3 loud shouts, his clothes instantly burst open, turned into ashes. And under his feet, on the vast great land, the expansive Qingyun mountain ranges rumbled loudly. The earth started to tremble, the 7 peaks of Qingyun mountains towering into the clouds. Without exception, Tongtian, Long Shou, Morning Sun, Sunset, Return of the Wind, Big Bamboo, Small Bamboo 7 summits, Green Mountains deep valleys, within the majestic huge rocks, golden lights spilled out, turning brighter and brighter, gradually converged and formed, the golden light resplendent, as if shooting out deep from the mountain's spiritual summits, as if these mountains originally were alive. In this resplendent golden light, the huge mountains started to breathe. And in this swaggering dazzling golden light, finally gathered and formed 7 different golden huge diagrams, on this great earth mountain peaks, facing in the far-away horizon that ancient sword Zhu Xian. Splendor horizon, glorious magnificent, even the beast deity was also dumbstruck. Zhu Xian ancient sword started to shake even more violently, and the Taiji diagram which was formed from blood was already spinning to a blur. Golden green flashed on Reverend Daoshuan's face, burst out in a loud shout. Break, a word, break, shouted, instantly the entire sky of swords shook intensely, the vast horizon, darkened completely, violent winds stones rolled, the mountains shook earth quaked, strange rocks started to fall, the solemn broad 7 summits golden diagrams, as if being tore apart by some great force, started to slowly scattered. And almost at the same time, the light on the ancient sword Zhu Xian became more and more intense, the white light dazzling, and even shrouded Reverend Daozan in it. And at this earth-shaking overwhelming scene, the 7 colors that had rose from the 7 mountain peaks, suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the sky full of swords also all gradually faded, leaving only that 7-colored main sword in the formation, turning even more resplendent. Rumble, sound of thunder, resounded throughout heaven and earth, the earth quaked even harder, those golden lights on the 7 peaks had reached their final moment, finally totally dissipated. Rumbling thunders, like the sea tide surged and reverberated in the sky, and below on the earth, instead turned silent, no longer quaking, no longer splitting. After which, almost at the same time, different colored lights more than 10 times intense than before, rose with a rumble, charged up to the sky and regathered onto the ancient sword Zhu Xian. Blazing brilliance instantly like explosion lit up heaven and earth. Shot forth in all directions, unimaginable light enveloped the whole world. On the ancient Zhu Xian sword formation, leaving only that huge colorful main sword, but at this moment, from the ancient sword Zhu Xian reflecting rays of extensive huge lights, little by little, in the 10,000s people's dumbstruck gazes, that colorful Zhu Xian main sword, from radiant splendor flowing lights, gradually integrated, gradually became a single color, giant sword blazing with white light, its resplendent 10,000s zhong, illuminating the world. In that instant, countless of people came out of their shock, watching the incredulous scene in the sky, everyone drunk in the sight, wild cheers undulating, filled up the Qingyun hill. Everyone came back suddenly from despair, in a blink seemed to be filled with confidence, that in this world evil still does not suppress the good, completely disregarding that it was still not the end of the battle, victory was still unknown. Just that, in this wild crowd, everyone looking up at the sky, no one will notice that in the mad chaos, there was a white figure, quietly leaving the crowd, swiftly heading to the rear mountain. The wind brushing past the cheek, a hint of chill, but how could it cover that ball of burning blazing fire deep inside the heart? Lu Shuiqi's snow-white face, indistinctly had a faint flush, tightly biting her lips, deep inside a pair of eyes, had already arrived deep inside that remote rear mountain. At the fringe of the sky, the chaotic situation was still pressing. But who else was still concerned? Indistinct ancient song, quiet language of the heart, following that fluttering white clothes, gone far with the wind, galloping towards that unknown distant place. Chapter 174 Zhu Xian. Compared against the phenomenal great battle at the front of the mountain, this fight was very much different. The fight between Ghost Li and Lin Jingyu, these 2 childhood good friends, the scale was much smaller than the former, but the intensity level seemed to surpass instead. Nobody could ever imagine that. Once as close like brothers, in the end it turned out like this. The 2 figures at one moment separated, at another moment clashed, like a wild storm engulfing the surrounding areas of the illusory moon cave. The trees were either struck down, uprooted, or split into half. Even the thick and solid great earth, by these 2 extremely fierce powers, became bumpy and rough, deep pits and broken stones everywhere. If it was just comparing their cultivation and power levels, Ghost Li had different sects, true ways and also practiced 3 volumes of Evil Sect Classic less than Tian Shu greater than. His skills level, actually definitely could not be used to compare against an ordinary martial artist. His skills could be said as one of the world's elite figures. Even for Lin Jingyu, this kind of talent, he was not as good. But at the moment the fight between the two of them, for some reason, it turned out to be quite well matched. If to compare their emotions, there were actually only 2 reasons. First would be that Lin Jingyu was inherently hot-blooded. For the past decade he had been following that mysterious elder in the founder's ancestral hall to practice. What he learned was a strong and fierce martial art which happened to stimulate his own potential, complementing his nature and the Dragon Slayer's sword's force of no return. The battle strength and force instead were actually higher level than his own skill level. And right now he was full of anger, each sword stroke fatal, almost like that 100 years ago legendary Wan Jianyi, an impossible force. And ghostly, although his skills level was high, a solid foundation, but it had a weak spot, which had been limiting him. At that time when he was practicing both Qingyun sect Taoism, Taiji Zan Qing Wei, True Wei and Tianyin Temple Buddhist sect, Great Brahman wisdom, each contradicting each other, causing his progress to proceed slowly, and although later on he was fortunate to learn the general principles of Tian Shu and linked up the 2 remarkable true ways, greatly increasing his cultivation level, but in his body, his foundation truth had already been changed to Evil Sect Classics less than Tian Shu greater than Strange Arts. Just that the less than Tian Shu greater than skills were really enigmatic and profound. Furthermore, there was a con to it. Although the general principles were all there, but the cultivation truths in the book were not complete within 3 volumes. At every critical junctures of training, there would be breaks, like as if one walks on a highway, going to and fro. The Great Tao translator note. It could also mean main road, suddenly a precipice cut off before you, unable to proceed ahead, wishing to walk the other way but there was simply no way to go. So as such these various obstacles were really not little. These few years the sinister orb's vicious currents backlash, Ghostly was helpless against it, mostly likely was because of this. As such, for Ghostly's cultivation, it could not be totally unleashed. But even though it was so, Ghostly with his number of true ways, how would it be trivial, less than Tian Shu greater than art, although it was incomplete, but it was after all an enigmatic skill since the creation of heaven and earth. The different ingenuity were not what an ordinary person could imagine. The 2 of them fought for a long time, and eventually it was still Ghostly who gradually gained the upper hand, the sinister orb's red rays and blood stench, like a venomous snake spitting, gradually suppressing the Dragon Slayer's sword's jade light. Lin Jingyu was shocked and angry. Although for the past 10 years Ghostly betrayed Qingyun and joined the evil sect, becoming a foe with the good faction, but he had never fought directly with Qingyun. And Lin Jingyu had always been practicing in the founder's ancestral hall, so although both of them had seen each other once in Southwest Death Marsh, but it could be said that they had never fought each other before. And in Lin Jingyu's heart, Ghostly's image was actually most probably still that simple and slow Zhang Xiaofan. From young till adult, from the Grass Temple Village to Qingyun Hill, Lin Jingyu was always stronger than Zhang Xiaofan in every aspect. Although in his heart he had always regarded Zhang Xiaofan as his own brother, but unwittingly, with his proud character since young, in many matters he still disdained Zhang Xiaofan. And for many years, things were what he had imagined. Zhang Xiaofan was not as clever as him, not as good-looking as him. Coming up to Qingyun Hill, many of the seniors also fought to take him as disciple, and yet nobody paid attention to Zhang Xiaofan. And in the later days, both of them trained separately. He went on to Longsho Valley and Zhang Xiaofan to Big Bamboo Valley. His cultivation skills even fared worse than him. These various situations, all clearly revealed that Zhang Xiaofan was really incomparable to him, just that after Qingyun Hill's 7 branches contest, Zhang Xiaofan for some reason had some good luck, could actually squeeze into the top 4, and he himself at that time was matched against senior brother Qihao and was defeated, although he felt somehow depressed, but assuming that the crowd also knew the reason for that, Lin Jingyu's opinions did not change much. All along, he viewed Zhang Xiaofan like his brother. When Zhang Xiaofan was being bullied, he sternly came forward, as if he was looking after his good-for-nothing brother. Until the breakup today, fighting till life and death, Lin Jingyu shockingly discovered, this person whom he had always regarded as someone below him, unknowingly seemed like he had already surpassed himself. An inexplicable fury abruptly burned from his heart. Lin Jingyu's dashing face suddenly looked somehow savage. He with his proud character, the only drawback was that he loved to go to the extremes. At that moment, he could not accept the fact. The jade green light shone, like an arrogant dragon roaring wildly, countered back in fury. In the intense fight, the purple gas column that both of them were circulating around, as a result from the heaven's secret seal being broken, was several times thicker than before. The roaring purple gas had already enveloped both of them. Lin Jingyu was in an inferior position yet suddenly retaliating, his strokes striking over like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. Ghost Li was shocked, watched as Lin Jingyu approaching with his sword, each sword stance swift, although the force was powerful, but he disregarded his own safety, attacking with all of his might. Ghost Li frowning tightly, right now they had been fighting for quite a while, or maybe because this was Qingyun's sacred ground, and furthermore with the purple gas column triggered by Zhu Xian ancient sword. In the beginning, the vicious currents aroused in Ghost Li's heart. It not only did not control his mind as before, instead it allowed his body's pure power to take over, gradually reducing. Ghost Li's head slowly regained clarity. Just that above their heads in the sky, was that Zhu Xian sword formation. For 10 years not a single night or day he did not think about this, it was really carved in bones and engraved in the heart. Biao's image moreover did not stop appearing before him, mentally draining and heartbreaking. And this person before him, after he became clear-headed, Ghost Li recalled the years of friendship, and right now his anger, most likely was also triggered by him, recalling that old man from the founder's ancestral hall. Ghost Li felt some guilt, as such, gradually did not have the mood to fight. Heaving a long sigh, with his perturbed mind, Ghost Li did not have the mood to continue the fight, only felt that right now this place was really an unbearable agony, and wished to leave. His heart also had a suffering thought, couldn't wait to return to majestic Fox Mountain immediately, looked at Bai Yao and to tell her all of it. And this moment, Lin Jingyu before him had already a sword out of the thin air, approaching with a sharp whistling. The jade ray like lightning broke out of the long sky. Ghost Li's face was heavy, he stepped 3 steps back, the soul-devouring stick struck down from the top, hit upon the Dragon Slayer's sword blade. Lin Jingyu's body shook greatly, felt a strange incomparable stench of blood evil current traveling over from that firestick-like black stick. At the same time there was a strange sucking power, stimulating his body blood, about to gush outwards, almost uncontrollable. Lin Jingyu turned pale, knew most likely it was that evil sinister magical weapon in Ghost Li's hand, but his nature was upright and unyielding. He was not only unafraid, did not retreat and instead advance. Dragon Slayer's sword, like a dragon swimming under the sword, rebounded up, disregarding his open chest, heading straight and attacking Ghost Li in the face. Ghost Li's eyes flashed. At that moment if he were to make a move, although he himself could not avoid being heavily injured but had 90% confidence of fatally hitting Lin Jingyu. Just that looking at this familiar face, Ghost Li's mind suddenly flashed with the image of both of them playing at that time, and then, Biao's smile. In this world, how many are there that I still cherished, still left in this world? As if laughing at himself, he laughed bitterly and asked himself, taking back the soul-devouring evil stick, at this imminent peril crisis, leapt up into the air, avoided it. Just that his bitter smile was caught by Lin Jingyu, like ridiculing him, infuriating him even more. And at this moment, Ghost Li, who was in the air, suddenly was shocked, looked far away, saw a white figure, swiftly like lightning floated over, until the person saw clearly the situation seen, like receiving a shock, on the absolutely beautiful face. It revealed a mix of pleasant surprise, indistinct grief and joy expressions, even her voice seemed to be trembling. You, it's really you. It was Lu Shuiqi. On her snow-white face, unknowingly since when, for the first time in her life, 2 teardrops quietly rolled down. That man looked at her stunned, slowly landed from the air, that familiar face, for how many years that longing which etched in the memory. In the beginning believing he was really dead, what kind of grief and anguish. If it was not for there was still outsider around, she practically wanted to fall into his arms and have a good cry. Who was willing to be lonely for a lifetime? Who was willing to spend the days alone? If it wasn't because the feelings had turned so deep and uncontrollable, how would it be that clearly concerned but appeared to be cold like frost? Ghost Li also felt stunned, opened his mouth and looked like he wanted to speak but was unable to say any words. Unexpectedly at this moment, Lin Jingyu behind him did not stop. The Dragon Slayer's sword like wind like fire, shouted loudly, still sweeping over. Ghost Li suddenly with a rude awakening, flipped to receive the enemy. He had already lost the key moment, the jade green dazzling light, about to reach him. Ghost Li's evil currents on his face surged, the sinister orb in that instant turned red. And at this imminent peril moment, suddenly, the once not long ago memories, faintly awakened again. A fair hand, stretched out from beside, grabbed hold of Ghost Li's hand. Ghost Li's body had a shock. Suddenly, his body seemed to lose all energy, an emotional feeling from the depths about to burst forth gushed up his heart, A wang sound resounded deep inside his head, suddenly turned back, a cry of, Bai Yao, about to call out. Just that he stopped in shock, blocking before him, white clothes floating, it was Lu Shuiqi. Chang Lang, like the phoenix cry beyond the highest heavens, clear and melodious, pleasing to the ear, Tianya's celestial sword like autumn waters flowing, unsheathed, a sword of irresistible force of dragon slayer's sword blocked off, Lu Shuiqi blocked before ghostly. That delicate, pretty face, full of tenderness, how would it be bothered, all of the things in the world? Lin Jingyu angrily hollered, Lu Junior's sister, are you crazy? Lu Shuiqi's body shook, like waking up from a dream, then, she quietly turned, looked at Ghost Li, her eyes misted yet gentle and beautiful, smiled gently, she slowly let go of Ghost Li's hand. Mad ah, Lu Shuiqi smiled faintly, her eyes seemed to contain only Ghost Li, quietly said, a long time ago, most probably I have already turned crazy. Ghost Li was silent, the vicious currents on his face dispersed, leaving only anguish flashed past his face, quietly bowed his head. Lin Jingyu was stunned, in the scene, turned quiet for the moment. And at this moment, suddenly above the sky, a deafening loud crash was heard, the mountains immediately quaked violently, with their level of skills, they could not stand firm too. The three of them were shocked, looked up at the sky, saw in the blue sky, that unequaled catastrophe, finally had reached the final moment. XXX. The blazing white light, dazzling, nobody could ever see clearly that human figure in that ball of light. People could only see, the dazzling light in the sky illuminated the entire firmament, even the rising sun at the sky fringe also paled in comparison. In the entire horizon, the Zhu Xian sword formation meteorological phenomena, right now only the main sword remained but the power contained within it, surpassed the entire sky of swords. The blazing white light which continued to intensify from Reverend Daoshuan's massive radiance, shot out to the main sword, the entire sword's color changed from 7 colors to a single color, from single white to pure white, its brilliance stretched for 10,000 zhang, like a wild sword about to pierce the sky. In the violent winds, the beast deity hovered above the clouds, watching that celestial sword which should not appear in the mortal world, his savage face had a trace of vacant. Before the 10,000s people, anticipated gazes, in the 10,000s wild-like joyous cheers, the huge blazing sword, slowly stirred, turned around, facing the beast deity. Just that movement, the surrounding black gas around the beast deity was forced to retreat several zhang by this natural foe-like white light. Deep inside the white light, someone seemed to pant heavily, the voice hoarse, like a wild beast deep growl, a trapped beast roar. The beast deity stared intently at that sword and mass of white light, after a long time, suddenly laughed out loudly, his voice was terrible and hoarse to begin with, right now laughing at the top of his voice, it was even more grating, the audience not one did not cast sidelong glances. The beast deity only laughed loudly, his demeanor wild, as if in his heart, there was a world's most ridiculous thing, but eventually he only laughed wildly, did not say a word. In the horizon, the violent winds turned more and more intense and cold, Zhu Xian's celestial sword's force became stronger and stronger, unknowingly since when, as if some voice from the heaven and Hades traveled over, softly chanting a mysterious incantation, started to reverberate between heaven and earth. That mass of blazing white light, suddenly rose into the air, landed on that resplendent Zhu Xian main sword hilt, almost at the same time, Zhu Xian's sword formation suddenly activated, like a force that could break the heaven, that sword attacked over with a scream, it seemed to be slow but in the heavens and below the earth, there was not one place that could avoid it. Encounter deity kill deity, encounter immortal kill immortal. Translator note, kill immortal also means Zhu Xian. In the current world, there was no longer any object that had such power. The strong winds scattered the last of the clouds, all completely dispersed, nobody would know, right now facing this Zhu Xian wild sword that beast deity's heart, what exactly he was thinking. Just that, he did not show the slightest fear and not even the slightest intention to retreat, welcoming the wind, welcoming the light, the enormous beast deity's body leapt up with gusto and actually headed straight towards Zhu Xian. Heaven and earth seemed to be still, the chaotic state seemed to stop breathing, everyone stared in shock at the clear sky, black and white the two colors traversed the sky, collided with a crash. Nobody could describe the situation at that time, the sky collapsed, the earth splitted, Qingyun Hill mountains in one day quaked thrice, this time was the strongest, the enormous mountain summit precipice, surfaced numerous cracks and gaps, numerous huge stones rolled from the mountains and dropped down. In the jade pool on Tongtian Peak, water waves rose and rolled, the original calm water surface incessantly surged up few zhang high of water columns into the air. And on the Qingyun hilltop, the good faction members and the remaining beast demons, all were as silent as a cicada in cold weather, especially those demon beasts which were like beasts but not like beasts, right now were all in great shock, restless, madly roaring. However, all of these comparing to the scene in the sky, seemed nothing, and nobody would care to. The huge Zhu Xian sword traversed the horizon, struck down with a rumble. Where it passed by, sharp hissing sounds were heard in the sky, all of the things along the way, completely annihilated, leaving not a single trace. In the periphery of the wild sword blade, along the outside of the white light, dark red color presented, not knowing if it's the intense air friction, or this blade itself was too intense. That sword struck down with a rumble, the beast deity howled long to the sky, all of his arms joined before his chest, his strange eyes glared widely. At that moment where Zhu Xian's sword struck down, the black gas multiplied, the strange hands stretched and withdrew, a shock of thunder rumbled in the horizon, he had forcibly catch hold of this celestial sword which seemed to be able to split the heaven. In that instant, in the heaven and below on earth, were all struck dumb with astonishment. However, white light leapt up, illuminated 10,000s Zhong, the huge Zhu Xian main sword emitted thunder rumbles, from the black hands like iron hoop, forcefully, slowly stabbed down. 1 inch, and another inch. The black hands one by one, gradually swallowed by the blazing light and dissipated. That wild sword now looked like a supreme ferocious deity, brandishing its claws, taking lives, carrying infinite murderous intention, bit by bit stabbed down towards the beast deity's chest. The black gas flickered, sharp whistles charging to the sky, black blood fluid sprayed out, the Zhu Xian sword finally stabbed into the beast deity's chest, and inching in, the blazing white light flickered intensely, like lightning flickering across the sky, hitting upon the beast deity's skin. Skin and flesh, slowly faded, the huge body, seemed to begin to appear illusory, almost turning into a void by this earth-shaking force. The light in beast deity's eyes turned weaker and weaker, in the end it could not fight against this unparalleled celestial sword. His figure under the Zhu Xian sword became smaller and smaller, but for some reason, as if the collision depleted the forces, following the beast deity's body shrinking, the huge Zhu Xian sword also started to shrink, only that mass of brilliance was still that bright and dazzling. This situation continued on, until the beast deity finally again reduced to a normal human size, the black gas shrouded for a moment and dispersed with a rumble, the crowd clearly saw, he again changed back to that youth, just that his appearance was pale, his hair in a disorder, evidently the defeat was determined. And more importantly, almost at the same time when the black gas dispersed, Zhu Xian's sword also dissipated, but that mass of light still congealed in front of the beast deity, flickering incessantly, finally gathered before the two of them, metamorphosed into that stone yet not like stone, jade yet not like jade Zhu Xian ancient sword, stuck in the beast deity's chest, horizontally piercing out. Reverend Daoshuan's figure slowly emerged from the light, just that he did not look like his initial celestial appearance, instead had turned cruel, his eyes were blood red. The beast deity heavily panting, coughing unceasingly, his lips trembling slightly, bended his head and looked at his chest. The Zhu Xian sword was stabbed in his chest, blood flowing out, but it was not red. He miserably laughed, heaved a long sigh, said, "Remarkable, remarkable." Suddenly, he had just finished his words, joining his hands together. Right now his body had regained a normal human appearance, his arms were also like normal human, but this joining of hands, clasped the Zhu Xian ancient sword between his palms, immediately black gas gushed, directly flowed into the Zhu Xian ancient sword blade. Ka! A slight almost inaudible sound was heard from the ancient sword. Reverend Daoshuan's countenance greatly changed, quickly glanced over, on the ancient sword, a line of crack clearly shone, horizontal on the sword. Reverend Daozan was greatly shocked, loudly shouted, using all of his strength, pulled out the sword. Almost at the same time, the moment the sword left the beast deity's chest, as if a severe pain attacking his heart, the beast deity roared loudly, his voice desolate, his entire being flew up to the sky and backwards. Reverend Daozan right now only felt the blood in his mind in a tumult like raging waves. A wave of murderous vicious currents tossed and turned like trying to break through his chest, but he was after all had profound skills, knew no matter what he could not let the tiger return to the mountain. Furthermore he had forced the heaven's secret seal opened, the veins of the earth's spiritual energies were too vigorous, it had already overloaded Zhu Xian's sword, and from that hit from the beast deity, it left a fissure. When he forced himself to take a deep breath and was about to pursue, out of a sudden a wave of strong force abruptly came from the Zhu Xian sword, directly hit his head, in that instant broke his body. Several hundred years of cultivated energy channels and acupoints, a loud ringing sound rang out. For a moment, his body trembled, blood flowed from the 7 apertures in his head, his body wavered, and with a loud cry, the Zhu Xian sword in his hand loosened, fell from the clouds. This shocking scene bewildered the people on the ground, all were struck dumb. Out of a sudden they saw a big change. The beast deity escaped with heavy injuries, Reverend Dao Zan instead collapsed, everyone immediately was in a chaos. For a moment, there were some who went to pursue the beast deity, there were some who rushed forward to save Reverend Dao Zan, and some younger disciples who came out from their shock, suddenly discovered there were still numerous demon beasts staring vacantly on Tongtian Peak, immediately attacked over, and how would the demon beasts allow themselves to be captured willingly? At that moment on Tongtian Peak summit, another tumult of attack shouts. And in this pandemonium, suddenly someone exclaimed, the voice was anxious and frantic, as if he had seen the most frightening thing in his life, Zhu Xian. Zhu Xian sword, where did Zhu Xian sword landed? In that instant, on Tongtian Peak, again another pandemonium, numerous people like headless flies, a scene of tumult. XXX. The boundary at the back mountain. The purple gas column in the illusory moon cave slowly scattered, leaving only a little remnant of propitious vapors. That extraordinary scene in the sky just now, the 3 of them stared in shock. Right now, they then regained their senses. Lin Jingyu inhaled deeply, calmed himself down, coldly spoke to Lu Shuiqi, Lu Junior sister, what is your meaning of this? Don't tell me you also want to betray the sect. Lu Shuiqi was stunned, opened her mouth to speak but turned and looked at Zhang Xiaofan, eventually did not say anything. Ghost Li stared at her deeply, both of their eyes met, as if looking deep into each other's hearts. Ghost Li smiled, turned and faced Lin Jingyu, once again stood in front of Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi viewed that back figure from the back, the light in her eyes glimmered, complicated and unclear. Lin Jingyu sneered, about to make a move. And at this moment, suddenly a sharp whistle was heard from the sky, whistling over. The 3 of them were surprised, moved back, something descended from the sky, seemed slow but actually fast. A sound landed on the ground, the solid stone slabs like beancurd, was stabbed deeply in by it. This was a long sword, the quality odd, like stone and not like stone, its appearance primitive, on that sword blade with a thin crack, clearly engraved with 2 words, Zhu Xian. Chapter 175 Blood-Sucking. Qingyun Hill, Tongtian Peak. Before the illusory moon cave, Ghost Li, Lu Shuiqi and Lin Jingyu, the 3 of them facing each other, it was actually a very delicate atmosphere. Suddenly it seemed to freeze, all of their attention in that instant were all on that ancient sword stabbed into the ground. Zhu Xian, the renowned ancient sword, implicating numerous past events, the legendary sword that determined countless number of people's fates, right now quietly stuck into the ground, looked ordinary and unremarkable, seemed to be part of this landscape. Only, that name carved onto the blade, was that glaring and overweeningly arrogant, although silent but obstinate, sternly watching the people around it, causing the onlookers unable to breathe normally. For an unknown length of time, like waking up from an inconceivable shock, the 3 of them at the same time let out a long breath, but almost at the same time, the atmosphere had quietly changed. Lin Jingyu instinctively moved and wanted to dash ahead, but after he glanced at the 2 people beside him, he instead frowned and slowly stood firm. Lu Shuiqi initially looked shocked, and then a bright glint seemed to flash past her eyes. Facing this ancient sword which had supreme position in Qingyun and even in the world, she was also frowning slightly. Following which, she subconsciously glanced at Ghost Li beside her. Watching his expression, she quietly pulled a distance from Ghost Li. Ghost Li was silent, looked expressionless, but in his eyes, a fire seemed to be blazing. That sword, the ancient sword which had been his nightmare day and night for the past 10 years, suddenly was before him. The primitive blade glimmered with faint light in the wild mountains breeze, reflecting in his eyes, it seemed like, stabbing into his chest. That, slowly falling down from the sky, graceful and lifeless green body image, a roar which seemed to burst forth from his chest, tearing apart his lungs, charging towards the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Dark green light flashed, the soul devouring ahead of him, moving swiftly, as if resounding with his master's emotions. Just that abruptly, bluish-green sword ray cut in from the side. Lin Jingyu, holding the Dragon Slayer sword, had already blocked in front of him. Boiling with rage, the jade green sword forcefully blocked the screaming dark green-black energy. A muffled sound, the 2 magical weapons had already clashed in the midair. Lin Jingyu wanted to shout but abruptly felt, even though it was broad daylight, but that weapon which accompanied Ghost Li, Suddenly the world dimmed, ghost wails besieged him with a loud sound, his body felt like he was being inextricably tied up with a large silk rope, and before him, many different frightening illusions that looked like they were from the 9 netherworlds. And ghostly before him, his eyes had already turned red again, full of murderous intention, his body appearing even more like a ghost. Lin Jingyu glared and shouted loudly. In the black energy the bluish-green light rose suddenly, broke through from above and leapt up, almost at the same time. Ghostly's figure had in a blink reached where he was. The black energy dispersed with a rumble like the wings of a demon, spinned and gathered again like a ghost hand, shrouding Ghostly in it, like an angry tide rolling from all directions, heading for that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Lin Jingyu was forced back from the air, couldn't defend in time, panicked and was about to shout in fury. Suddenly before the ancient sword, deep inside the black energy, a ray as bright as autumn waters, like frost snow bursting into bloom, voiceless yet a clash, reverberating far off, in the black energy, bloomed like flower, a sword stabbed out. Tianya, that frost-like snow-like white light, streaked through the sky, where it brushed past, the black energy slumped and scattered, directly attacking towards the recesses of the darkness ahead, blocked its path. Lu Shuiqi appeared and blocked before the Zhu Xian sword, her face expressionless, a clear and beautiful face, her face was instead pale and looked without any color. Deep inside the black energy, 2 spots like ghost fire stared at Lu Shuiqi, the ghost wails chilling, wild with anger and irrepressible. There seemed to be something ahead, like a wild beast panting and roaring, that unfamiliar. The black energy exploded, from the ground it suddenly reached several jong high up in the air, and within the black energy, that 2 spots of ferocious ghost fires also disappeared. Lu Shuiqi's lips slightly moved, her face pale and expressionless, only that glint in her eyes flickered unceasingly. 10,000 torrents and 1,000 crags seemed to pass by in that instant, countless emotions, at that instant rushed to her heart. Just that, the Tianya in her hand, still refused to give up, that ancient sword behind, suddenly seemed to turn into a 10,000 jong abyss, making her unable to retreat not even a fraction. An ancient sword, or maybe a silent and ancient sect that raised her. She raised her sword to the sky, quietly stabbed, that sword light like snow, yet carried a trace of desolation. The black energy ghastly, the wailings abruptly rose, in the air, the direction where Tianya stabbed towards, a black figure emerged suddenly, ghostly appeared out from the dark energy recesses, but before him, the soul-devouring flew up, instantly, the black energy that covered the sky filled the air and descended, the entirely black soul-devouring stick screamed unceasingly, at the tip of it the blood-red thin lines, had all totally lighted up. A pale hand, stretched out from the air, grabbed hold of the stick, coming down from the sky, wind and smoke immediately turned wild, unlimited dark gas gathered at the top of the stick and formed a column, struck down from the sky. Facing Lu Shuiqi, and also at her back, that silent ancient sword. Just that, she in the end, still did not retreat. The sword stances like snow, sprinkled towards the black gas, before it touched it, the surrounding stones and sand, were all swept up by a huge force, like a storm circulating and dancing. Lu Shuiqi stood in that vortex eye, her face slowly blurring. Tianya and soul devouring, the 2 weapons flickering and dancing in the midair, seemed to be slightly quivering, as if that fight many years ago, again returned before them. Just that the time available was always short-lived, like the emotions passing by in an instant, an intense crash, finally still reverberated through before Qingyun illusory moon cave. The wind and smoke quietly dispersed, the dust and sand fell, and a few small rocks solitary spun on the ground, involuntarily gently rolled out, finally rolled into the grasses, disappeared from sight. Lu Shuiqi was still standing at where she was, did not move at all from her original spot. Behind her, the Zhu Xian ancient sword seemed to still emit an ancient light, watching the back of that lady. For some reason, this woman of unmatched beauty, right now her eyes and face, were that tired, as if that sword just now, had exhausted all of her heart and body strength. She quietly bended down her head, her eyes indifferent, looking at some unknown spot. After a long time, she then slowly raised her head, looked ahead. That man who was like a madman. A man who was as silent as iron. That same eyes, quietly watching her, there was no malevolent energy, no anger, and also no affection or warmth. Lu Shuiqi suddenly for some reason trembled, that slight quiver, even she herself also felt she could have mistaken, just that what followed, the pain in her chest made her almost bend over, as if the world's sharpest needle passed through from deep in her heart. Her pale like snow face, suddenly turned red, her body wavered gently. At that instant when her brows tightened, when she was about to clench her teeth and bare it, suddenly she closed her eyes and bent over. Tianya Tsi, a light sound, inverted and stabbed into the ground. Lu Shuiqi, leaning on the sword, coughed out a small mouthful of blood, spraying it onto that autumn waters like sword blade. Blood, slowly congealed into beads, adhered to the smooth Tianya sword blade, gently quivered, then, quietly slid down. A wind from nowhere blew, on the empty ground before the illusory moon cave, swayed and passed by. The wind was still carrying a few light whistling sounds. The black gas dispersed totally, ghostly still coldly standing there, the soul-devouring flickering with dark green light, fell from the sky. He stretched out his hand to catch. And when Ghostly turned and looked at Lu Shuiqi, Lin Jingyu had already returned, in a flash stood beside Lu Shuiqi, blocked that ancient sword behind him. Ghostly coldly looked at Lin Jingyu, and then at Lu Shuiqi. The two of them, who were to him almost like the most important people in the world, in his eyes, were no different from strangers. In the mortal world, a lifetime of time, but how many people could accompany you till old, forever unchanged? He gritted his teeth, grinned, smiled yet proud and aloof, heartless yet unyielding, energetically stepped forward. That sword was just ahead. Even if it was a bottomless abyss, he would also dash to it. 10 years of time, 10 years of heart-breaking anguish, how could he give up at once? Lin Jingyu looked angry. The bluish-green light in his Dragon Slayer's sword lighted up again, and at this moment, suddenly Lu Shuiqi stood upright, although her face looked even paler, but her voice was still as clear and mesmerizing as that time. Stop right there. Ghostly's body paused, stopped his steps, then looked deeply at Lu Shuiqi, sternly said, "You make way." Lu Shuiqi had a desolate look, said, "Listen to me, go. Never come back again." Lin Jingyu frowned, glanced at Lu Shuiqi, wanted to speak but halted. Ghostly, after hearing it, did not get Lu Shuiqi's intention, sneered and said, "Let me destroy Zhu Xian, I will leave immediately." Lu Shuiqi tiredly shook her head, quietly said, "I can't let you do that. The forces at the front of the mountain will come over soon. You can still make it if you leave now." Ghostly and Lin Jingyu were stunned, listening carefully. As expected, a faint hubbub could be heard indistinctly from afar. Seemed like there was quite a number, arguing about something. Actually thinking about it carefully, this was not surprising. What kind of celestial weapon was Zhu Xian ancient sword in Qingyun sect? Its importance incomparable. Unable to find it after searching the entire battle scene at the front, naturally they would come to the rear to search. Not to mention the rear, even if it was to flip over the entire Qingyun mountains, for the Zhu Xian sword, most likely these disciples and grand disciples of Qingyun sect would be willing. Hearing that the hubbub seemed to be getting louder and clearer, obviously the crowd was heading over to search. Ghostly's face turned cold. Suddenly, with a sneer, he moved, disregarding everything. He headed towards them. Lu Shuiqi looked grieved, but without waiting for her reaction, Lin Jingyu had already leapt up. The Dragon Slayer's sword woo, a sound like a split cloth. The sword stabbed over, the sword light glowed brightly, like a swimming dragon it brandished its teeth and danced, pouncing over to Ghostly. Ghostly's face was cold, his body like an apparition, his left hand waved, the soul-devouring stick again flew out, but it completely disregarded the might of the Dragon Slayer's sword, directly hit towards Lin Jingyu's head. Lin Jingyu was taken aback. The style was strong and fierce, and was even more similar to Lin Jingyu's usual style. Unexpectedly, Ghostly used it against him. Facing this level of fierce offensive, Lin Jingyu's inert eagerness to do well and arrogance, bit by bit, was inflamed. With a loud shout, he, as expected, ignored the stick. The Dragon Slayer's sword did not reduce its force and instead increased, looked like it was intending to bet against Ghostly, see whose guts was bigger. Both fought like a battle of life and death. Lu Shuiqi watched from beside, couldn't help but trembled, watching carefully. Subconsciously her eyes had a trace of concern. Just when the both of them looked like they were going to perish together, Ghostly's body suddenly wavered on the spot and dispersed like black smoke, like an illusion. Lin Jingyu couldn't stop in time. His sword continued to stab through the air, felt something greatly amiss, turned his head back in a panic, saw the black figure-like apparition, appeared behind him and heading towards Lu Shuiqi. This kind of power, naturally, was not from Qingyun sect, Tianyin Temple, also not seen before in evil sect. It was after reading the third volume of Tianshu gradually comprehended the strange skill from it, not seen by the world. Trying it today, he achieved success as expected. Even Lin Jingyu with his caliber was also tricked. Lu Shuiqi also couldn't help but look bewildered. Just that for some reason, Ghostly, who had demonstrated Tianshu skill, His entire body was totally different from before, not as one expected to be full of eerie demonic black energy. Dark green, gold, red, scarlet, several energies took turns to surface. His face had an indistinct pain, but his body was as swift as the wind, seemed to be on a higher level than before. Lu Shuiqi was bewildered but faintly had some comprehension. Different from Lin Jingyu, when they were at the Celestial Tree in the West Great Mash, in Celestial Emperor Treasury, she and Ghost Li both saw that enigmatic Tian Shu third volume, with her level of natural aptitude, much higher than Ghost Li, had long already memorized Tian Shu in her heart. Tian Shu although was strange and unfathomable, but between the lines were all extraordinary esoteric truths. Cultivators were naturally obsessed with it. If it was said that she did not put an effort to study it intensively, that would be a lie. Just that this kind of skill could not be told to outsiders, she did not tell anyone, and besides, what she saw was only the third volume, the preceding and subsequent portions missing, especially without Tian Shu first volume of general principles, it was even harder to grasp, obscure and unclear. These past years, just using her own aptitude intelligence, forced her way to understand it. More or less it helped her own training, but it was not obvious, but it was also because of that. Those elders in Qingyun sect did not detect anything, if not with Reverend Dao Zan, Tian Buyi, Shuiyu Master etc. their current cultivation levels, how would they not notice the strange development in Lu Shuiqi's cultivation training? Right now, Lu Shuiqi saw Ghost Li's strange skills, her brows frowning slightly. Ghost Li, after tricking Lin Jingyu, like a formless object it solidified from the black smoke, swiftly transformed into himself, without reducing speed, heading straight to Lu Shuiqi. Lu Shuiqi clenched her teeth tight, suddenly moved 3 steps back sideways, revealing the Zhu Xian sword behind her, appearing before Ghost Li. This move shocked both Ghost Li and Lin Jingyu. The difference was that delight was shown on Ghost Li's face. Lin Jingyu instead angrily shouted, "Lu Junior sister, what are you doing?" Lu Shuiqi turned a deaf ear, a glint was seen in her eyes. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but eventually with a soft shout, Tianya's sword facing the wind and thrust out, but where the sword ray was pointing, was instead opposite of Ghost Li, 3 kai before the ancient sword. Pooh! A light sound, Tianya's sword seemed to draw a blank, but for some reason, Lu Shuiqi's body shook, and at the tip of the sword, after a moment of silence, blood splattered, sprinkled into the air. And that Ghost Li, who was heading swiftly towards the sword, emitted a yacht sound, again transformed into black smoke, scattered. And at this shocking instant, where blood splattered like flour, Lu Shuiqi's pale face looked somehow distracted. A roar was heard, Ghost Li's figure suddenly flashed out in the air. Tianya's sword was stabbed into his shoulder, but he did not look to feel the pain at all. Viciously pouncing over, the sinister orb at the tip of the stick was totally red, a blood-sucking evil energy overwhelming swept over, enveloping Lu Shuiqi in it. Lu Shuiqi turned pale, felt all of her blood in that moment, like boiling water surged and tossed, almost bursting out of her body. A wang-wang sound rang out in her head, the severe pain unbearable, her legs weakened, unable to sustain any more, sat down. Ghost Li with a long scream, the sound desolate, at that moment when the sinister orb flashed before Lu Shuiqi's beautiful face, forcibly twisted it back, at the same time his left hand waved, swept Lu Shuiqi out. The same time Lu Shuiqi flew out, Tianya's sword also followed along. At that moment when the sword was pulled out, blood like fountain poured out from Ghost Li's shoulder. And Lu Shuiqi in the air, the sinister orb evil power was still raging, pounding and moving unceasingly, a severe pain in her chest, with a wah sound a mouthful of blood splattered out. In the scene, Ghost Li landed, there was no other object in his eyes, only that ancient sword. Right now he was drenched in blood, half of his body was swiftly dyed red with blood, but as if he did not feel it, he seemed to be gnashing his teeth, stared straight at Zhu Xian ancient sword. The primitive Zhu Xian sword quietly stabbed in the ground before him, the not stone not jade sword couldn't even reflect his face. Only that faint thin crack, seemed new. Ghost Li laughed loudly to the sky, his demeanor like mad. 10 years of time in that instant flashed past, without any more words. His left hand abruptly grabbed the sword hilt, right hand summoned the soul-devouring stick grabbed tightly in his hand, hatefully facing the sword blade, struck towards that crack. Lin Jingyu bellowed from behind, rushed forward with all of his might, but it was still too late. Lu Shuiqi had just descended, her mind still in a mess. Far away, the hubbub suddenly became louder, as if discovering something, all swiftly rushed towards the illusory moon cave. Just that, in that moment of time, who could do anything? Nobody could ever, detain a moment of time. That soul-devouring flickering with dark green light came screaming down, its master right now with blood streaming down, following his left hand trickling down, drop by drop landed on Zhu Xian, flowing past that crude-looking Zhu Xian blade, slowly concealing it. Not one seemed to land on the ground. Indistinctly, in that instant, Ghost Li's heart moved, as if there was some strange yet familiar scene that touched his heart, like a lightning flashed past his mind. The next moment, he suddenly realized. It was blood. In that instant at the corner of his eye, he saw his own blood, flowing on the Zhu Xian sword blade, especially towards that crack. It slowly disappeared, swiftly and soundlessly merging into the sword. Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian. Zhu Xian was actually like sinister orb, it could absorb living things' blood. He was stunned and could not control himself, but the soul-devouring stick which was smashing down in his hand, had long surpassed the speed of thought in his mind, hit hard on that ancient sword. Chapter 176 Escape. The Zhu Xian ancient sword did not move, in that instant, as if everyone was holding their breath, but the scene was terribly quiet. There was no sound, no loud rumbles. Ghost Li looked at that soul-devouring evil stick which had smashed down was a force like 1,000 jun. After hitting the ancient sword, it was like landing into cotton. There was no sound. Angry bellows were heard. Lin Jingyu's entire body leapt up. Qing Yun sect various elders appeared one by one. Swift as the wind and quick as lightning they flew over, but when they saw that that ancient sword was in Ghost Li's hands, immediately everyone's countenance changed. The next moment, more and more Qing Yun sect members gathered. In this chaotic scene, nobody kept to the original prohibitions, everyone trespassed this area which was supposed to be restricted. Among them were Small Bamboo Valley Wenmin and Big Bamboo Valley people. The moment they saw Ghost Li, their expressions changed greatly. Wenmin and other Small Bamboo Valley female disciples saw Lu Shuiqi collapse to the side, quickly rushed over and helped her up. As if being disturbed by Qing Yun sect people, something seemed to be activated, that ancient sword under the watchful eyes, although still in the hands of Ghost Li, but for some reason, on its blade, a change seemed to be happening. The original simple and slightly crude, non-stone non-jade blade, on that fissure, after Ghost Li's forceful hit, right now, it seemed to have expanded a little. Right now within that fissure, faint red light slowly emitted out, as if the blood which it had sucked in, became alive, deep within the blade, started to turn agitated slowly. An initial peaceful great sea, waves started to form slowly, brewing unrivaled storm, enveloped the world. Silence, silence, anyone could see the change in the Zhu Xian ancient sword, but nobody knew what to do. Silent before the illusory moon cave, everyone held their breaths and waited. Nobody knew, whose heart was quietly throbbing. Ghost Li felt thirsty, subconsciously wanted to release Zhu Xian, but the next moment, he discovered, his strength seemed to have completely disappeared instantly. A familiar yet distant feeling reappeared in his body, and this feeling was what his enemies feared. The blood in Ghost Li's body slowly boiled and seethed. It started to have the pull of flowing outwards, and the direction was towards the Zhu Xian ancient sword that he was clenching in his hand. Ghost Li seemed to comprehend something, exerted strength to release Zhu Xian ancient sword, but he had no strength in his hands, and the Zhu Xian ancient sword at the moment was like a demon awakened, clutching him, refused to let him go. And the soul-devouring stick in his right hand, right now was also stuck tightly to the Zhu Xian ancient blade. That fissure on Zhu Xian ancient sword, red light gradually from faint to dense, at the same time, like blood flowing through an artery. From that crack, thin faint color of blood began to spread. From the fissure edges, it flowed swiftly towards both parts of the blade. The ancient blade slowly, submerged by the blood-red color. Everyone was stunned, including those veteran elders. At the moment, everyone knew something was wrong, but no one knew what had exactly happened and what should be done. And that Zhu Xian ancient sword seemed to simply ignore the people's concerns, continued to carry out its own degeneration. The faint blood color finally dyed the entire sword blade red. An originally primitive ancient sword, at the moment had become a strange and mysterious blood-red sword. Faint red sword glint, slowly glimmering, like a reborn demon's eye, slowly waking up, watching the surrounding. The scene seemed to tense up, until that man holding Zhu Xian suddenly unleashed a heart-wrenching cry. Ah! That sound was extremely desolate. The crowd was almost startled, their attention suddenly focused onto Ghost Li. Ghost Li was pale, trembling unceasingly. His face, hands, the skin surface where it was not covered by clothing, began to obviously swiftly shrank and then gradually withered. At the same time, a strange and light whistling sound started from the Zhu Xian ancient sword. The red light turned brighter. Some sharp-eyed ones had already saw. From Ghost Li's left hand, which was holding the ancient sword, faint red strands were being sucked into the sword blade. This was an extremely strange scene. There wasn't a single bit of Qing Yun sect's just an honorable good faction demeanor. Everyone at the scene was rendered speechless and no one moved. Except Lu Shuiqi. That woman was initially lying weakly in her senior sister Wenmin's arms, but right now for some reason, she suddenly struggled up, sprang towards Ghost Li and that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Wenmin was shocked, quickly held her back. Lu Shuiqi struggled a few times, her body eventually fell helplessly down, her face looked anxious, opened her mouth and wanted to shout something, but she looked around and shut her mouth in defeat. Leaning in the arms of her senior sister Wenmin, who looked concerned, her eyes deep, she looked towards that man instead. So, the twists and turns, the endless thoughts and pinnings, after the painful heartbreak, it was actually helplessly watching him before her eyes, dying that tragically. Her face full of tears. Finally couldn't be bothered, the stares of the others around her. The red light on Zhu Xian ancient sword turned stronger and stronger, and contrary to that, Ghost Li looked more and more terrible. Now everyone could see that, under the Zhu Xian ancient sword, divinity power, this evil spirit, evil ways, the scourge of the good faction had already reached the death edge. Perhaps, this was also the psychic power of the celestial sword, performing spells to eliminate the evil. Many of them in their hearts, quietly thought so, but completely refused to contemplate if this actually makes sense. Ghost Li naturally would not think of that and also did not have the energy to think about what others were thinking right now. At this moment, he was struggling before death. Zhu Xian ancient sword's suction force was growing stronger, even to him, stronger than the sinister orb which he encountered when he was young at the rear of Big Bamboo Valley. Just that right now his cultivation was incomparable to that young man at that time, therefore he was able to hold out till now. However, he also understood, he could not hold out any longer. The strange suction power on Zhu Xian ancient sword was similar to the sinister orb evil power at that time, but there were also differences. Compared to sinister orb, Zhu Xian sword, which had turned into a demon sword, was even stronger and different from the sinister orb which absorbed blood at that time. Zhu Xian ancient sword, while sucking in blood, at the same time, sucked in Ghost Li's years of cultivated true vitality energy. In Ghost Li's eyes at the moment, Zhu Xian ancient sword emitting blood red light, indistinctly like a devil opening its bloody mouth and grinning, soon it would swallowed him up. Just like that, ending a life. The moment before he was about to go unconscious, this thought flashed through his mind. A burst of warm energy, started with a loud sound, burst forth from his heart. It was pure yang breath, directly dispersed into his meridians. His entire body shook, his mind immediately cleared. A loud shout, using his entire lifetime of cultivation, burst through with all of his might. Thunder and lightning seemed to rumble in his head. 3 volumes of Tian Shu flashed past. Green, gold, red, 3 color energies leapt up at the same time, although not very bright, but it regained vitality. The great Brahman wisdom spanned the heart arteries, the Buddhist true way defended tenaciously. Even the Zhu Xian ancient sword was also taken aback. Taking advantage of this breathing space, Taiji Zan Qing Wei as the path, Ghost Li's right hand immediately doubled, dark red lights leapt swiftly across, from his arm in a blink, entering into the soul-devouring evil stick. However, just when Ghost Li wanted to counterattack and escape, Zhu Xian ancient sword's devouring evil energy had again broke through the great Brahman wisdom. Instantly Ghost Li's body felt numb, unable to move again, and that trace of sober in his mind, once again turned bleak. At the moment, to the others, Ghost Li's withered face, already looked no difference from a dead man. Song Darren and the rest, whom had friendly relations with the past Zhang Xiaofan, all started to turn their heads around, could not bear to see. At this moment, when the final outcome seemed concluded, that soul-devouring evil stick in Ghost Li's hand suddenly lit up, dark green light slowly pulsed, like awakening from a deep slumber. The sinister orb at the tip, strands of evil red blood lines, again lighted up, and deep inside the orb, an unprecedented, under the dark green light and blood strands, a golden Buddhist mantra surfaced. Buddhist, Taoist, evil 3 sects true ways. Actually at this moment, unexpectedly when Ghost Li was making a final thrust at death's end, merged into one. The sinister orb turned brighter and brighter, strange yet gorgeous light rays flickering non-stop. Then, the entire stick also lit up, as if it was shouting something. The next moment, the point where the soul-devouring and Zhu Xian ancient sword met, a muffled sound was heard again. The crowd then realized and noticed that other than Ghost Li's left hand, the soul-devouring stick in his right hand had always been connected to Zhu Xian, did not drop down. The strange lights on the sinister orb were getting brighter and brighter, the 3 colors rotated, deep and low sounds, like the ancient devil whispering voice, slowly emitted out. Woo, woo, woo. A red gas, crystal clear, first from the fissure on Zhu Xian ancient sword, sucked out and entered into the soul-devouring stick, rolling inside the sinister orb. It seemed to be still resisting, but soon it could be seen. It was suppressed and subdued by sinister orb's strange energy, slowly transformed into a faint red color. A small part of it assimilated into soul-devouring, most through the soul-devouring stick, re-entered Ghostly's body. This strange transformation did not stop once it started. Red gases continuously sucked from the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Following the increasing amount of red gas, the soul-devouring light strengthened and became stronger, and Ghostly, who once again received nourishment, also gradually recovered. The skin on his face slowly, from being withered, regained his original look, and strangely it even revealed an indistinct warmth. The red glow on Zhu Xian ancient sword from the initial dazzle, right now it seemed to be helpless against sinister orb's suction power, gradually dimmed down, and the soul-devouring stick instead turned brighter. The surrounding Qingyun sect members were not blind too. Most could tell that the situation was not right. Now obviously it was Ghostly, this evildoer, who had secretly casted some evil spells. Zhu Xian ancient sword looked like it was unable to sustain. A stir of commotion in the crowd. Suddenly a few people scolded loudly. At the same time several weapon lights attacked Ghostly. Ghostly right now was wholeheartedly resisting the ancient sword Zhu Xian. How could he pay attention to the surrounding movements? He did not have the slightest reaction. The next moment, all of the weapons' attacks hit him squarely in the back. Ghostly's body shook greatly, blood surging, a sweet taste in his throat and another mouthful of blood, spat onto the ancient sword Zhu Xian. Zhu Xian had already dimmed down. With this sudden blood, red light again flashed. It actually turned stronger. Ghostly at the same time felt it. Before he could attend to his injuries, his body felt the strange suction power of Zhu Xian turning stronger again. A shock of lightning seemed to go through his heart. He understood that this was really life and death. If Zhu Xian regained its power, most likely he would not be able to survive and would be sucked dry again. With such thoughts, he roared madly, disregarding everything, using all of his strength, his entire lifetime of cultivation, and that a moment ago comprehended merger of the three sects' true ways supernatural power, hit out. The crowd did not see Ghostly making any move, saw him hit by several weapons, throwing up a mouthful of blood. The Zhu Xian ancient sword's red light wavered, looked like it was about to lit up. A loud sharp sound suddenly erupted between Ghostly and Zhu Xian, accompanied by a few sounds of fractures. Ghostly was actually hit out by an unknown powerful force, like an arrow leaving the bow, streaked past above the crowd, landed far into the distant woods. Qingyun sect members were taken aback, stood stunned. After a long while, suddenly someone realized and shouted, "Give chase, definitely can't let that evildoer escape." The words reminded everyone. At once countless people pursued towards the direction where Ghostly fell. Everyone at the scene clearly understood. Ghostly was obviously seriously injured in his fight with Zhu Xian. Right now this was a golden opportunity to pursue and kill this person. Most of the people soared up to pursue. Only Big Bamboo Valley, Small Bamboo Valley members stood blankly at their spots. Song Darren and the rest felt torn between pursuing or not, and when Min and the others had another flurry of exclamations, Lu Shuiqi had fainted. While the ladies from the Small Bamboo Valley hurried to care for Lu Shuiqi, suddenly, in the hubbub, a light sound rang out. Although the sound was very light, but for some reason, like a fine sharp needle, piercing into every Qingyun sect disciple's heart. That sound, which sounded like something quietly breaking, beside them, emitted from the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Everyone suddenly turned pale, as if that light sound was the echo of the end of the world. They slowly turned around. It seemed that even this movement also exerted all of their strength. Under everyone's watchful gazes, that legendary Zhu Xian ancient sword quietly stood in the ground slate. That expanded tear from the ancient blade once again issued a small crackling sound. The tear slowly spread, slow but unstoppable. It spread to the surrounding, on that primitive and once divine sword blade, until the Zhu Xian ancient sword again issued a moan. Pa! That light crisp sound, half of the blade attached to the hilt, fell to the ground while the other half of the blade, still deep inside the earth. In that instant, everyone was dumbfounded. There was no breathing, their minds totally blank. Zhu Xian ancient sword, broken. The vast heaven and earth, blue sky daytime, suddenly a crack of thunder in the horizon, thunderous crashing, in a blink winds and clouds rolled over from all directions, heaven and earth swiftly turning dark, black clouds loomed, gathered at Qingyun Hill summit. A gale started, sand and stones rolled, accompanied the sudden storm, thunder and lightning clashed, wild storm and rain poured down. The firmament, heaven and earth, seemed to be crying too. It was night. heaven and earth weeping, the celestial sword came to a premature end. The cold rain hit upon the face, like the raw pain of a knife, the chill eerie, as if the entire body was frozen. Ghostly in the woods, could not help but moaned. The pouring rain had already rained for a full hour, but there was no sign of it weakening, although it was still daytime. But at the moment the black clouds loomed low over the horizon, enveloping Qingyun, like late night, not even the hands could be seen. It was also fortunately so. Ghostly seriously injured, with this sudden storm, he was able to temporarily avoid Qingyun Sek's pursuit. Just that strange duel with Zhu Xian's sword, especially that final blow, Zhu Xian's power recoil was really formidable, penetrated forcibly into his body, broke half of his ribs, the fractured bones now piercing into his lungs and heart. Luckily his cultivation was deep and solid, but he was still made of flesh and blood. Every step, the pain made him broke out in cold sweat, his mouth making hissing sounds. At the moment, Ghostly really wanted to disregard everything, lie down and lost conscious, just that last trace of sanity constantly reminded him. He had to leave, his grudges with Qingyun sect and his current broken body. Once discovered by Qingyun disciple, there was only death and no other. And to him, there was still a reason not to die. And so he endured, slowly struggling to run forward, away from the Qingyun hill, the safer it would be. The rain poured, madly pouring into this mortal world, as if using this water of heaven to wash away the ugliness of the human world. Ghostly panted heavily. Each breath, in this dark rainy night, issued a faint white breath. Chill shrouded him, the clamor behind him was nearing, full of murderous intention. Obviously, although Ghostly fled with all of his might forward, but his heavily wounded body was not faster than the pursuers. Just that in Qingyun Hill dense forest, the sky was dark and black, he was temporarily not found yet. However, Ghostly knew in his heart, going forward like this, it was inevitable. He staggered, seemed to trip over some roots or vine-like thing, his body tripped and fell forward. In his panic he grasped around, lucky he grabbed a small tree beside him and stabilized his body, but this toss, this violent shake, the severe pain in his chest penetrated deep into the bones, he almost could not breathe, not to mention stride and escape. Behind him human voices suddenly approaching, as if in this storm, someone had heard the noise, issuing a command. Many footsteps headed towards Ghostly's direction to search. Ghostly's heart turned cold, but he was still unwilling to be caught. Even if he ran and flee, he would also not be able to escape. Hardening his heart, he closed his eyes, quietly slipped into the muddy ground, his face facing down, burying into the mud. In the dark, he was like a pile of mud which was abandoned by this wild storm world. Footsteps, the human clamor, slowly gathered over. Many people were cursing while continuing to hit out fiercely at the surrounding trees and vines. Strong wind swept past, not knowing how many people had rushed over. Ghostly in the dark, lying motionless in the ground, as if his heart had also stopped beating, in the darkness, quietly waiting for fate's sentencing. Heaven and earth heartless, maybe treated all living things only as straw dogs. The storm was raging. Chapter 177 Man in Black. Wild winds, torrential rains, there was still no signs of it ceasing. In the darkness, spots and bits of brightness swept past. They were the magical weapons in Qingyun disciples' hands. Using the weapons, lights, they searched in the storm. Here was already close to the boundary of Qingyun rear mountain. Thick dense forests, ancient trees grew thickly, vegetation exuberant, coupled with the terrible weather. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed across the horizon. From time to time lightning cracked down from the sky, striking the forest, often splitting a tree. It was really a terrifying scene. Before the might of heaven and earth, those slightly weaker disciples could not help but were terrified, trembled with fear. And in the darkness, those spots of brightness looked like trembling fireflies, flying incessantly, illuminating just a little area around them. Rumble. Above the dark clouds in the sky, another clash of thunder exploding. The people on the ground felt ringing in their ears, struck dumb and turned pale. It had been more than 4 hours since the search for Ghostly started, but they still had not found any traces of him. Many started to feel apprehensive in their hearts. Couldn't be that the evildoer had escaped. In fact, it was not unjustifiable. Ghostly is evil sect Ghost King sect vice head. His skills as expected was superb, although he seemed to be wounded by Zhu Xian's ancient sword 4 hours ago, but who knew how heavily wounded he was? As long as he was not at the edge of death, most likely Ghostly would have the ability to quietly sneak away. This thought quietly reverberated in many of the Qingyun disciples' minds, just that their teachers pushed and rebuked them from behind. In the end they did not dare to give up and could only continue to search. Few could imagine, in the darkness recesses not far ahead of them, Ghost Lee seriously injured, too weak to escape, clinging on to the last hope, creeping in the muddy ground. Dim light in the darkness, suddenly someone shouted loudly. "Stop! Everyone stop!" The person's voice carried off far into the darkness, even the rumbling of thunder in the horizon could not cover his voice. This was clearly a senior with deep skills. Ghost Lee lay motionless on the ground, letting the rain hit his body. Hearing the voice he instead felt it sounded familiar, but for the moment, he was unable to recall who this person was. But it was clear that the surrounding Qingyun disciples were extremely respectful and trusting of this person. Almost at the same time when he shouted, the Qingyun disciples could be heard stopping immediately, stood where they were and ceased talking. In the winds and rain, the clamorous search swiftly quietened down, indistinctly in the woods, not knowing whose panting breaths. The storm turned more frantic. There seemed to be someone carefully listening to something. Ghost Lee felt a chill suddenly penetrating into his heart and lungs, his entire body cold. There was actually a creepy kind of strange feeling. As if this eerie silence, compared to that loud shout of search, was even more daunting. After a moment, suddenly a voice lightly said, "Father, what is it? Could it be you heard something?" Ghost Lee was startled. He was very familiar with this voice. That was his once good friend Zhang Shushu. A moment later he knew who the elder was directing this area of search. It was the head of Return of the Wind Valley Zhang Shuchong, also Zhang Shushu's father, and the Qingyun disciples searching this area, mostly were Return of the Wind Valley disciples. Zhang Shuchong enjoyed a reputation for a long time, and indeed he was really not ordinary. In this racket of storm, he was still able to detect the unusual noise made by Ghost Lee, but at the moment the dark jungle before him, 5 fingers could not be seen. Other than the storm there was no other news. Even himself could not help but also doubted if that slightest sound he had heard, could it be he had mistaken, or it could be with so many people searching, they could have startled some animals and caused that. After contemplating for a moment, Zhang Shukang frowned in the darkness, waved his hand and said, "All disciples separate, form a row, not more than 3 kai apart, slowly search ahead, not to miss even a gap." Ghost Lee was stunned. With a fine search like that, he almost did not have any chance of escaping. Just when he was panicking, Zhang Shushu anxiously said, "Father, the forest is so huge, assigning the disciples here to conduct such an intensive search, then won't other areas be unsearched?" Zhang Shukang lightly said, "I have my reasons, you don't have to say any more, quickly go." In the dark Zhang Shushu was nonplussed, did not dare to say any more and only turned to move forward. In the darkness, for a moment no one spoke, but the spots of lights could be seen moving forward in the storm, gradually forming a long snake, slowly advancing. For some reason, the atmosphere in the woods suddenly became somehow strange. That racket just now, everyone was agitated and nobody felt fear. Right now this silence, somehow it made them felt some hair-raising feelings in their hearts. Because of the cultivated weapons, the light from the magical weapons in those Qingyun disciples, hands generally could not be cast very far and had limited brightness, but they were joined and slowly advanced. Soon, from Ghost Lee's hiding place, it was only less than 2 jong away. "Wait!" Suddenly, Zhang Shukang loudly shouted. Dozens of surrounding Qingyun Hill Return of the Wind Valley disciples paused at the same time. Zhang Shushu was surprised, walked to his father. From the weak light cast from the weapon, Zhang Shukang looked grave. "What is it, father?" Zhang Shukang's eyes were deep, stared into the darkness ahead, but where his eyes thought, was not where Ghost Lee was concealed. Instead, it was to the opposite direction, parallel straight to the far and deep dense woods. In the darkness recesses, there seemed to be nothing, but it also seemed to be filled with countless of demon and spirits figures, howling and dancing madly in the storm. Something is wrong. Under the dim light, Zhang Shukang's facial wrinkles seemed to deepen. His eyes actually had apprehension, but he was after all not an ordinary person. Years of practice trained his heart to be composed. After coldly snorting, he had already made a decision. Zhang, a light whistle. Everyone was surprised. Zhang Shukang actually wielded his celestial sword. The sword ray appeared silvery white. In the dark storm it swallowed and spat out rays of light, bright and dazzling, completely different from those Qingyun disciples in the surroundings. But he was seen only remaining silent for a moment, loudly said, "I will be ahead, all of you remain the same." Still according to what was just said, "Do a line search but follow behind me not less than 1 jong, do not come near." Everyone at the moment knew something was not right, but with Zhang Shukang around, they felt that they had someone as their pillar. Zhang Shukang's face was solemn, holding his sword and walked ahead of the troops, and the others remained the same, just that they maintained 1 jong distance from Zhang Shukang, did not dare to go near. This strange team continued on like this, slowly moving forward. The unusual atmosphere, as if in this night of storm in the dense forest, gently panting. Woo, woo, like the wind and rain howling but also like the roar of a beast, but suddenly realizing it was his own heartbeat. That heart actually beat faster and faster. Zhang Shukang's old face reflected the brilliant light of the sword, became more grave. In the depths of the woods ahead, a faint mysterious hostility was felt, although it felt obscure and even unable to determine if it was a foe, but the strange waves of palpitation in his heart made him unable to belittle it. That feeling, he had not felt it for a long time, recalling the last time, it seemed to be 100 years ago, he with Tian Buyi and a few, followed their senior brother Wang Jianyi into the wildlands, the scene of directly attacking the old nest of evil sect. The long years of time, in a blink it had already been so long. But not knowing, if Wang Jianyi's senior brother who died an untimely death, had reincarnated. This strange thought suddenly conjured in his mind, even he himself could not help but feel surprised and ridiculous. He inhaled deeply, boosted his spirit, for some reason, today really felt different from the others. Rumble, another clash of thunder, exploded out of a sudden, the might of heaven and earth, for a moment shook the world, as if the great earth underneath, seemed to quake a few times. Almost at the same time, a lightning tore across the sky, broke out from the clouds, striking down into the mortal world. Like a sharp knife of heaven, slashing towards the mortal world. Everyone was aghast, their hearts leapt out, some could not help themselves. Suddenly someone who was looking only at the horizon, tripped and fell, gasping, he almost cursed out. Unexpectedly, when he turned back to look, illuminated by the lightning in the sky, before him a muddy body, lying motionless on the ground. Ah! His voice desolate, suddenly rang out, here, here. Jay. A muffled sound, that disciple's shout was suddenly cut off, but in that moment, it had already alerted everyone. Immediately all turned and leapt over. A black figure leapt up from the ground, but before he could stand firm, his body wavered a few times, almost collapsing. Instantly several magical weapons mixed with the rain and winds hit over. Ghost Li's heart sunk, but he was unwilling to be caught without a fight. Gritted his teeth, he flew forward, unexpectedly taking only a few steps, a severe pain in his chest, he could not sustain and fell head down. The crowd behind him cheered, a few Qingyun disciples had already rushed up, stretched out their hands to grab Ghost Li. And at this moment, suddenly, the darkness in the dense forest seemed to expand, like a beast's soundless cry. Deep inside the darkness a light ray flashed past. Zhang Shukang's eyes instantly widened, immediately he leapt forward, at the same time harshly shouted, all disciples retreat, fast. The Qingyun disciples before they could react, Zhang Shukang solitary leapt into the darkness ahead. The celestial sword in his hand initially was bright and dazzling, but when he entered into that darkness, it was never seen. Angry shouts and whistling were heard unceasingly. Just when the Qingyun disciples were at a loss, a strange figure shot out from the darkness ahead, heading to where Ghost Li was lying, at the same time also towards the Qingyun disciples. With the help of from the small spots of light, this figure was totally enveloped by black shadows, revealing only a pair of eyes, glinting. Qingyun disciples loudly shouted, unsheathed their swords and charged up. Unexpectedly this person was highly skilled. Without seeing him wielding his weapon, he instead stretched out his hand and grabbed for the nearest disciple. That disciple was shocked but did not panic. The weapon in his hand slashed down. That man in black did not make any sound, took no notice, his stance did not change, before the crowd, grabbed that weapon with his hand. Everyone was shocked. Before they could react, that person shook forcefully, the Qingyun disciple was thrown flying out, and that weapon was snatched over by that man. The level of this person's skills was extremely powerful. In the darkness ahead, Zhang Shukang bellowed incessantly, but he seemed to be held back by someone, unable to extricate himself to come forward to help. This strange night, inconceivably there were that many mysterious highly skilled masters lying in ambush. Although the enemy's skills was extremely high, but these Qingyun disciples were all from renowned sect and not ordinary sect disciples. Shocked but no one ran off, instead all wielded their weapons and leapt forward. That man in black seemed anxious and impatient, exerting strength in his hand. That stolen weapon immediately dazzled with brightness, far surpassing the glow when it was in that young disciple's hand. The light flashed, the sound of wind sharp, it chopped down from the air, a grand halo directly struck towards the group. The Qingyun disciples cried out, a hubbub of shouts, all retreated to meet the enemy. Unexpectedly, although that person's impetus was great, but it was just an empty show of strength. With one stroke he forced everyone back a few steps, did not continue the fight, and straightway carried up Ghost Li, who was lying helplessly on the ground, not knowing if he had already fainted, swiftly flew towards the darkness at the back. Qing Yun disciples were all taken aback and incensed, surprised that this mysterious person who charged out of nowhere was so highly skilled, incensed that Ghost Li who was in their hands was taken away again. Ghost Li was the scourge of Qing Yun sect, and because he came from Qing Yun sect, everyone in Qing Yun sect had long wanted to get rid of this person. Now that they were robbed halfway, how could they take this lying down? All started to pursue. After pursuing for a while, suddenly a shout, bright light flashed, shot out from the darkness, to the crowd. This sword ray seemed to be striking towards themselves, quickly paused their bodies to meet the enemy. Only Zhang Shushu managed to reach and flew up, moved his sword, but he felt a shock to his palm and involuntarily stepped back. However, the incoming sword was deflected by him, flew towards the sky. The next instant it fell inverted, a sound into the mud. It was that celestial sword which was snatched, still making a wang wang sound. And with this moment of delay, that man in black had already like an apparition, swiftly vanishing into the darkness with Ghost Li, and Zhang Shukang who was battling fiercely in the darkness. Right now with a sudden shout, someone seemed to make a muffled groan, bloodlight appeared. Everyone was stunned, not knowing whether was it Zhang Shukang who was injured or the enemy. Great debt of gratitude to teacher, right now they could not be bothered so much, all leapt forward. Just that when they reached halfway, Zhang Shukang had already leapt out from the darkness, landed on the ground, blocked them, looking at his figure, although he was still able to move swiftly but his steps were staggered, at the same time he panted heavily. This short period of battle, to him, exhausted much of his strength. After his panting calmed down, he immediately quietly said, "The enemies ahead are highly skilled and their numbers are not small, all of you must not be rash." Zhang Shushu and the other younger disciples were stunned. They never expected that in this place, they would encounter such a situation. Zhang Shukang stared at that mass of darkness ahead, in a deep voice said, "Who are all of you? Why are you all meddling in our Qing Yun sect matter? With your skills, you all would not be someone unknown, why not come out and talk?" The winds raged and the rain poured impatiently, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, but for some reason, that mass of darkness deep inside the forest was still that dense, like ink that would not dissolve. Nobody replied Zhang Shukang's questions. There was only the sounds of the storm and breathing sounds of Qing Yun disciples. Zhang Shushu quietly stepped forward, whispered, "Father, where are they from?" Zhang Shukang shook his head slightly, in a low voice said, "They deliberately concealed their identities, what they revealed were not their true skills, could not tell for the moment." Speaking he frowned, raised his voice and shouted, "Gentlemen, still not revealing yourselves?" His voice reverberated far into the forest but still no one replied. Zhang Shukang's countenance suddenly changed, stamped his feet and said, "Damn, fall into a trap." Speaking, he leapt up, his celestial sword casting out resplendent light, this time to all surroundings. There was no longer any shadows shrouding, evidently those people had all escaped, came like the wind and left once they got their man. Obviously it was all planned and calculated. Zhang Shukang heaved a long sigh, descended. Zhang Shushu at the side directed the other disciples to continue to search the surroundings, to try and find any clues, and also quietly asked Zhang Shukang, "Father, what is it?" Zhang Shukang's face revealed a trace of disappointment and then sighed and said, "Although we exchanged strokes hastily but indistinctly I could feel, these people were not using evil sect skills, and furthermore if evil sect members came to rescue Ghost Li, they would not have to be in hiding. But, who were those that wanted to save this evildoer? And their numbers were not little and yet so highly skilled." Speaking, he frowned tightly, pondering. Zhang Shushu did not speak, turned and looked ahead. The forest dense, darkness covered it, how would they see anything? But, those who took Ghost Li, who were they? Nevertheless, Zhang Shushu walked ahead, quietly told himself, it was after all better than in Qing Yun sect's hands. As he thought that way, in this stormy night, in the thick woods, he seemed to recall 10 years ago, the first time he met Ghost Li at Qing Yun Hill Tong Tien Peak. After a long while, he sighed again in the darkness, continued to walk forward. No matter what the future would be, the path still had to be continued on now. On the other side of the unknown dense woods, in the recesses of the darkness, there was another strange dark figure gazing from far onto Zhang Shukang and the rest. It was Mr. Ghost. Right now his eyes seemed uncertain, looked perplexed, pondering. He was still bemused. After a long time, he watched as those Qing Yun disciples' search area widened on, but a person with a discerning eye would know immediately. This was the sign of giving up. Searching like that, in this huge dense forest, how would they still be able to find someone? As expected, in a short while, Zhang Shukang's voice rang out again, "Forget it, all of you come back." Qing Yun disciples clearly could not wait for these words, started to walk back. Mr. Ghost from far watched Zhang Shu Kang did a head count and then turned and led the disciples towards Qingyun Hill, gradually disappearing in the dense forest. He slowly emerged from the darkness, his eyes instead drifted to a distance, watched the direction where those mysterious men in black had headed, staring deeply. In the storm, there seemed to be a voice quietly speaking, there is actually still someone interested in him. Chapter 178 Meditation Room. Thunder, lightning, wind, rain, almost screaming unceasingly in his ears, the chaos in his mind, feeling muddle-headed, he could no longer differentiate who exactly he himself was anymore. Only that in the severe pain, he felt waves of wind and rain brushing past, heading towards an unknown place. Someone seemed to be speaking beside him, that voice seemed rather unfamiliar, sounded slightly anxious, faintly he heard, "He doesn't seem right, quickly come and take a look." A cold hand roamed about on his body to check, a moment later a stunned voice said, "How did he get such serious injuries?" The person beside angrily said, "Superfluous words, with that Zhu Xian sword, do you think?" He did not catch the end, because a burst of dizziness hit his head and almost fainted. In his daze, he indistinctly felt the horizon was still rumbling with unceasing sounds of thunders. The person beside seemed taken aback, quickly investigated, that cold sensation from the hand, made him slightly sober. He heard the person urgently said, "This is bad, his forehead is burning, I'm afraid he is having a high fever." So he was also having a fever. This was the last thought in Ghostly's head, after which, he fainted again, there was no more conscious. A loud sound shook him awake from his unconsciousness. His first reaction, he thought it was the thunder from the horizon. For some reason, although he was somehow conscious, it was still darkness before him. He struggled to open his eyes and look around but discovered in shock, his own eyes were still shut, unable to be opened. Following which, a wave of severe pain was felt, but it was not from his injured chest, instead from his throat. He subconsciously moved his mouth, making a light and hoarse cry, "Water." There seemed to be no one around, leaving him lying alone helplessly on the ground. His throat was feeling even more parched, like being on fire. His lips moved slightly, an inexplicable strength came from his body and he moved his body slightly, the consciousness in his mind, he seemed to be more clear-headed. "Ah!" Suddenly a voice was heard beside. This voice was different from the usual, but he seemed to hear it before, somewhat familiar. A surprised tone in the voice said, "You are awake, senior brother, quickly come over, he is awakened." Suddenly it became quiet, immediately footsteps sound were heard approaching quickly, arriving before Ghostly. Ghostly struggled again to open his eyes, but for some reason, this time, the strength in his body seemed to vanish. In his daze he saw two figures squatting before him, and behind them, there seemed to be more dark figures. As for those people's faces, he was unable to see them clearly. "Water," he whispered again. This time, the people around him understood. "Quickly, bring water over, hurry up." The hurried footsteps, rushing to and fro, the next instant someone ran over, following which a cold hand lifted his head carefully, a bowl-like thing placed beside his lips. Cold, clear water touched his dry lips. Ghostly's face moved and struggled to open his mouth, drank mouthful and mouthful of water. That cooling water entering his throat, like oasis spilling into a dry land, immediately relieving that pain which seemed aflamed. Ghostly felt relief. Immediately a wave of tiredness again fell into unconsciousness. The people beside were surprised. Immediately someone came over to feel Ghostly's pulse. The next moment a sigh of relief said, "It's all right, he is too seriously injured and having a fever at the same time. His strength is nearly exhausted, right now there is no danger to his life." Once the words were said, the people around him seemed to be relieved. Then, someone seemed to be watching Ghostly, gently sighed. He fell asleep for unknown length of time. In between Ghostly woke up a few times, but each time he fell unconscious immediately after waking up. In his memory, he only remembered there was always someone beside him. In his blurry state, he saw many people, his parents when he was young, his innocent and beautiful senior sister, deeply etched in his heart by Yao, maintaining a distance Lu Shuiqi and many more, all flashed past before him. Once, he even thought that he saw 10 years ago Tianyin Temple Fa Shang, fashion senior brothers, sitting beside him chanting Buddhist mantra. At that, he smiled bitterly, but he himself did not know too. This bitter smile, whether his face revealed it, maybe, eventually it was still an illusion. Just like, this life turned upside down, like a dream and illusion. Why chant mantra for me? Chanting mantra, what was the use of it? When Ghostly was awake momentarily, he thought like that quietly in his mind, and then, he fainted again. Dong, 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 dong. A low deep bell seemed to reverberate in the horizon, lasting a long time, waking him from his deep slumber. That deep bell, coming near from afar, slowly, it seemed to strike deep into his heart. For the first time, he did not have the impulse to open his eyes, quietly lying there like that, not thinking and not caring, where he was now, and in which world. The boundless universe, at the moment having left with only deep low sounds of bell. Dong, 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 dong. The melodious bells, seemed never-ending, continued to strike on. He listened, his breathing peaceful, all of his attention focusing into this peaceful sound, unwilling to leave it again. For such a long time, this was the first time he was lying down with no worries. Who would know, the days of carrying so much burden, what kind of agony it was? Just that, this tiny heaven and earth, eventually could not last long. Sounds of footsteps came near, walked to where he was, disrupting his thoughts. The sound of bells striking in his heart, suddenly seemed to leave him, in a blink far at the horizon. Silence, sigh, he slowly, opened his eyes. Buddha. This was the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes. A large, Buddha, word, hung on top of the roof. Surrounding this word, a circle of golden patterns wrapped around it, and then along the periphery, circles of finely carved 500 arhat idols, again formed a huge circle. The arhats were all of the same sizes, but their divine appearances were all different, arranging in rows, extremely proper. Then at the periphery of the big circle was a blue bottom with black edges, false ceiling, 2 kai higher than the circle with the Buddha word in the middle. The painting on it was completely different. It was checkered square, each square 1 kai, with golden color embroidered border. In it painted Kiran, phoenix, golden dragon, mountain goat and other auspicious Buddhist animals. These patterns were the same in each square. Although he was not an expert in sculptures, but with only one look, Ghostly knew that this was supernaturally fine workmanship. On the roof, inside the inner circle surrounding the Buddha word, hung 2 golden chains, suspending an altar lamp that never ceased burning. Looking up from below, there was a roughly 3 kai wide copper basin, presumably filled with oil. Ghostly frowned and turned his head to look around. The place looked like a meditation room in a temple. The room was quite spacious. Standing at the 4 corners were red-painted big pillars. The floor was paved with tiles. The door was made of paulownia wood. A window was opened on both sides of it, painted using the same red color, looked extremely dignified. On one side of the wall a painting of Guanyin Bodhisattva holding a vase of clear water. Below it a long altar with incense burner. On it there were 4 plates of offering fruits. Pears, apples, tangerines, oranges. Before the offering fruits a copper incense burner was placed. 3 joss sticks were lighted and placed in it. Thin smoke tendrils drifted up, diffusing into the air. The other side of the wall was where Ghostly was at. Here a wooden bed was placed, simple and sturdy. There wasn't any more decoration. Most likely monks would not be concerned with those things. The room was generally simple. Other than what was described, there was only a round table placed in the middle, surrounded with 4 round stools. The table was black. On it were teapot and teacups, all made of plain porcelain. And at this time, the sound of footsteps had already arrived at the door. The meditation room door creaked opened with a sound of jia pushed opened by the person outside. Someone strutted in. Ghostly looked at him and was surprised. It was a young monk he had never seen before. He was holding a wooden plate, on it a fresh pot. He did not look over at Ghostly and went straight to the table in the room, exchanged the pot on the table with the one in his hand. Who are you? Ghostly asked, but he had just said the first word. Suddenly he felt the pain in his throat, though it was not as burning painful as that time when he was in a daze, but it was still uncomfortable. His voice also immediately turned hoarse. Although it was so, it shocked that little monk. He immediately turned, his actions abrupt, nearly flipping over the wooden plate in his hand. Ah, you are awake. That little monk was surprised, but delight showed in his eyes. He smiled and said, wait a while, I will call my senior brothers in immediately. Speaking, he was about to dash out of the room. Ghostly spoke to his back, hoarsely asked, little teacher, I will like to ask, where is this place? That little monk turned around and smiled, an innocent and delicate expression on his face, said, here. Here of course is Tianyin Temple. Tianyin Temple. Ghostly was dumbfounded, like being hit with lightning. That little monk ran off, most likely to call someone, leaving Ghostly lying stunned on his back, his mind in a chaos. Tianyin Temple. Bewilderment and shock in his heart, but for some reason, there was another agonized feeling, surfacing out from the depths of his heart. Tianyin Temple. Tianyin Temple. Puji. From far voices were heard. At the same time footsteps walked towards the room. Someone whispered to that little monk, That little monk was obviously young, innocent and bubbly, laughed frequently while replying. For some reason, hearing those conversations, Ghostly went into a daze, did not think about his current situation nor the past grudges, right now this moment, for no reason he was envious of this ordinary little monk. With his innocent lively look, maybe he still did not know that the world also has suffering and hatred. Young and ignorant, but in so many of our years, those were instead the most happiest days. The footsteps stopped suddenly, just outside the door. Someone spoke to the little monk. "You don't have to go in, why don't you go now and inform the abbot at the backyard, that Zhang Xiaofan patron has already awakened?" Little monk laughed and said, "All right. But Fa Shang senior brother, you agreed to teach me great Brahman wisdom, this you cannot go back on your words." That person outside the door laughed and said, "Little fellow, so greedy, I promised you and so will not renege." The little monk was clearly delighted, he laughed, jumped happily and went off. The wooden door opened, "Jia" sound, someone seemed to pause, inhaled deeply and then walked in. It was really Fa Shang, and behind him, was that tall and big monk, Fashion. Wearing a pale blue monk robe, fair clean face, his hands holding prayer beads, Fa Xiong's appearance did not seem to change at all these 10 years. He unhurriedly walked to where Ghostly was lying, until when he reached the bed, his eyes met Ghostly, the two of them did not speak. The atmosphere in the room turned somehow strange. The next moment, Fa Xiong's lips revealed a trace of smile, clasped his palms together and bowed to Ghostly, said, "Zhang patron, you are awake." Ghostly's eyes twitched, suddenly coldly said, "My surname is not Zhang, I have long forgotten that name." Fa Xiong's countenance did not change, only looked at Ghostly, after a while lightly said, "Whichever name to use naturally will follow your choice. Just that, if you even abandon your surname, did you ever think that you will be letting down your parents who raised you up?" Ghostly's countenance changed, snorted, and did not speak anymore, turned his head and did not look at him. Fa Shang did not look offended, he with Fashion, looked at this evil sect evildoer who was spurned by the world's good faction, their eyes were all filled with kindness and gentleness. Fashion moved 2 stools from the round table behind him, placed beside the bed, quietly said, "Senior brother please sit." Fa Shang nodded, sat down on the stool, looked at Ghostly, said, "How is your body feeling now?" Ghostly, without needing him to ask, actually had already checked his own body. His fractured ribs had all been put back in place and secured with thick bandages. As for his shoulder and other superficial wounds on his body, were all dressed up, although he could still feel pain from his wounds but indistinctly a cool clear sensation could be felt. Obviously good medication were applied on his wounds and so had this level of healing effect. Fa Shang was not offended when he did not reply, smiled and said, "When you were unconscious, I have already helped to place your bones back. The other superficial wounds are not that serious, just that your internal organs are seriously injured and need to be nursed with great care before you can heal. Also fortunately your body is strong, if not even if it was a cultivated person with deep skills, with that kind of heavy wounds, most likely also cannot avoid death." He paused for a moment, and continued, "I guess that little junior brother of mine also told you. This is Tianyin Temple, you being here, other than a few of us here in the temple, nobody else in the world knows, so it is very safe. You only need to focus on getting well here will do." Ghostly suddenly interrupted his words, directly stared at him in the eyes and said, "It was all of you who saved me." Fa Xiong's smile froze, seemed hesitated, turned and glanced at Fashion. Fashion lowered his head, softly chanted. Fa Shang looked back, without hesitation, nodded and said, "Yes." Ghostly snorted, said, "Don't tell me you all didn't know, that if Qingyun sect comes to know what you all have done, what situation will that be?" Fa Shang faintly said, "Of course I know." Ghostly smiled coldly and said, "Since then, why do you still go against your teacher's wishes and save me this evil sect evil person?" Fa Shang glanced at him, for some reason, his eyes looked different. Ghostly frowned and said, "What are you looking at?" Fa Shang smiled, said, "How do you know, that I must have defied my teacher to save you?" Ghostly was stunned, said, "What?" Fa Shang leisurely said, "Qingyun sect at that time the 7 branches, leaders were all extraordinary people, each with their own outstanding skills. The return of the Wind Valley head Zhang Shukang is one of them. That day when we fought him, to hold him back and in that short time disguised and not reveal our own sect's skills, this level of ability, I am still not there yet." Ghostly stared at Fa Shang, stared for a long time. Fa Shang looked back at him, his smile unchanging. After a long time, Ghostly suddenly closed his eyes, did not look at Fa Shang any longer. Fa Xiang nodded, said, "You are seriously wounded and still not recovered, need to have more rest." Ghostly closed his eyes, suddenly said, "Why did you all save me?" Fa Xiang was silent for a moment, faintly said, "This question, I cannot answer you." Ghostly took a deep breath, said, "Why?" Fa Xiang quietly chanted, said, "You don't have to be anxious, after a few days when your injuries are better, there will be someone who will tell you." Ghostly opened his eyes, frowned and said, "Who?" Fa Xiang's lips moved, seemed to hesitate but eventually still said, "There is no harm telling you, it is our teacher, Tianyin Temple Puhong Master." Ghostly looked nonplussed. A moment later, looking at Fa Xiang's face, he knew he couldn't get any more answers, heaved a long sigh, laid down and buried his head. From far the bells tolled leisurely, again faintly traversed over. Dong, 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 dong. Chapter 179 Secular Prayer Hall. Morning bell, evening drum, day after day, almost never ending. Every day seemed exactly like the previous day. Some days were dry and dull, some were peaceful, indistinct years, long or short, it was all in the human heart. In a blink, Ghostly had stayed in Tianyin Temple for many days, listening to the early morning bells and low deep evening drums. Somewhere in the temple the bells tolled promptly every day, quietly spending the days. Somehow, in just a few days' time, he seemed already accustomed to this unusual environment. Every day he was taciturn, just staring blankly. He was in the prime of his youth, his body in excellent condition, although heavily injured, but firstly he was young, secondly, his cultivation was deep. In addition, Tianyin Temple was particularly generous with him. Whatever good medicine they had they were not stingy, using it on him as they pleased. With Tianyin Temple's reputation and position, the good medicine in the temple, naturally compared against the world it would be high-grade medicine. The medication's efficacy quickly came into effect, the wounds on his body healed really fast. Just a few days, he was already able to get down and walked with effort. However, when he was walking, his chest was still in pain, and so in a few steps, he was panting non-stopped. But even if it was so, it made those who visited him, Fa Xiang etc., happy and delighted, praising that they had never seen someone who recovered that fast. Most likely less than a month's time, he would be fully recovered. Ghostly on most days got along with them briefly, occasionally chatted. Both parties avoided talking about their opposite roles. Almost right now in Fa Xiang and the rest of the Tianyin Temple monks' eyes, Ghostly was only an ordinary person that they were treating out of goodwill, and not them facing opprobrium, forcefully snatched the evil sect evildoer from Qingyun sect's hands. And Ghostly no longer asked Tianyin Temple the question on why they saved him. The days passed by leisurely. Ghostly day by day recovered. These few days, he was able to walk more easily. Sometimes when the morning bell and evening drum tolled, he would take a chair, opened the window, sat by the window and listened attentively. It was almost as if this bell and drum in Tianyin Temple, to him, had a special pleasing appeal. While he was recuperating, Tianyin Temple monks only Fa Xiang and Fashion came often to visit him. The other monks almost never came, let alone Puhong Master and the other Pu generation level of masters. And because for the sake of recuperation, Ghostly also never left the room. Other than occasionally opening the window to gaze outside, appearing before him, was only a small courtyard, red walls, glazed tiles and only a few short trees planted. Just that to Ghostly, such a simple and ordinary small yard, was actually a sense of familiarity that had not been felt for a long time. From the day he opened the window, although he did not reveal it, but in his heart, he immediately liked this place. Listening to the bell in the morning, the drum in the evening, such quiet and leisurely time, only for a short period of time, it had already made him reluctant to let go, intoxicated. Who knew, in his heart, the most extravagant hope once, was to live such peaceful days only. Mount Meru, Tianyin Temple, among that vast extensive temple, shrines and pavilions, that small courtyard in an unfamiliar secluded corner, living like that, living. Ji ya, the wooden door was pushed open. Fa Xiang walked in alone, swept his gaze around and then onto Ghostly who was lying on the bed. Ghostly's eyes were closed, not knowing if he was asleep. Fa Xiang smiled, turned and closed the door. He asked Ghostly, "How do you feel today? Does your chest still hurts?" Ghostly's body moved and he slowly opened his eyes, glanced at Fa Xiang, indifferently said, "You ask this question each time you come, don't you get tired of it?" Fa Xiang smiled and shook his head. His eyes moved and he walked to the other wall, before that painting with Guanyin Bodhisattva, took 3 sticks of incense from the altar, lighted it up with the candle placed beside and then inserted into that copper incense burner. Faint smoke curled upwards, diffusing into the air. that painting of Guanyin Bodhisattva suddenly seemed indistinct, the air also gradually infused with faint fragrance of incense. Fa Xiang clasped his palms together, prayed 3 times to the Guanyin Bodhisattva painting, then turned around and looked at Ghost Li for a long while, suddenly said, "Aren't you coming over to pray?" Ghost Li was stunned, couldn't help but turn to look at the painting. Guanyin Bodhisattva in that painting was benevolent, dignified, beautiful, a pair of discerning slender eyes lightly gazing into the distance, almost like watching the living things and mortals in the world, this moment, also benevolently watching himself. His heart moved, but then he sneered, "What do I pray to her for, if she is indeed spiritual? In the past I have prayed earnestly to heaven and the various deities and Buddhas countless of times, I don't see them being merciful." Fa Xiang looked at him for a long time. Ghost Li did not shrink away, the sneer was still on his lips, not showing any signs of backing away or regret. After a long while, Fa Xiang heaved a long sigh, turned over, bowed his head low and prayed to Guanyin Bodhisattva himself, softly muttering something inaudible. Ghost Li watched from behind, continued to sneer. Fa Xiang paid his respect, turned, the benevolence expression on his face slowly disappeared, replacing with calmness and a smile, said, "I see that you are looking better today, and recently your body have mostly recovered, why don't we go out?" Ghost Li looked nonplussed by that statement, said, "Out, to where?" Fa Xiang smiled and said, "To where you wish to go, to see who you wish to see." Ghost Li frowned and then raised his eyebrows and said, "Why, don't tell me Puhong Master he." Fa Xiang nodded and said, "It is, teacher heard that you have recovered, is extremely delighted, asked that I come over today and see, if you are not feeling weary, you can meet him. I wonder what do you think?" Ghost Li watched Fa Xiang for a long time, suddenly smiled and said, "Good, good, good, I waited for a very long time for this day, of course I want to see him, regardless whether my body has recovered, even if it was that day with severe injuries, if only he was willing, even if I have to crawl I will also crawl to see him." Fa Xiang clasped his palms together, "Patron overstated, please follow me." After speaking, he led the way, walked first to the door, opened and walked out. Ghost Li followed next, however when he was about to walk out of the room, for some reason, he turned back suddenly and glanced at that Guanyin Bodhisattva painting on the wall. In the curling tendrils of smoke, Guanyin Bodhisattva merciful brows and kind eyes, slightly holding a smile, seemed to be watching him too. Ghost Li's brows frowned, snorted, immediately turned, never turned back again, walked straight on, leaving the faint incense fragrance, in that empty room behind him, gently drifting. Walking out of the courtyard, a path about 2 zhang long, 4 kai wide, lined with red walls, about the height of 2 humans, green glazed tiles covered the top, the end of the passageway was a round arched door. Walking near the arched door, he indistinctly heard sounds outside. The sounds were rather weird. At first it seemed to be monks chanting the scriptures inside the temple, but in it were mixed with other strange sounds. Some were unexpected to appear here, like women from the villages gathering to chat, or believers performing a Buddha ceremony loudly. There were even faint crying sounds of children. These strange sounds, how would it appear at Tianyin Temple, which was known as one of the world's 3 good faction great sects? Ghost Li's mind was surprised and bewildered, looked towards Fa Xiang but saw his expression unchanged, continued to lead the way, heading towards the arched door and walked out. Ghost Li frowned, composed himself and also walked out. Outside, it suddenly opened to a wide clearing, white jade-like stone, leveled and paved as the ground, stone steps layer upon layer, 9 forming into a group, connected up to a main hall of a Buddhist temple containing the main image of Veneration Da Shang, a total of 81 steps. And among the carved balustrades and jade steps, the temple halls towered imposingly, extremely high. Before the temple 13 enormous great stone pillars rose to the sky, their heights exceeding 10 zhang. The temple roof was splendor and dazzling, 8 roof ridges distributed equally above, carved into dragon heads. Before each dragon head upturned eaves ridge, 10 auspicious animals were carved on it, their demeanors different and lifelike. And the different carvings in the temple were magnificent and exquisite, surpassing mortal's imagination, not what an ordinary person could make. Behind the main hall, both sides, front, were lofty temple buildings one after another. Between them public squares or winding small paths connected them, some directly connected together, piling up one after another, an extremely grand sight. Just that although the architecture was magnificent and imposing, and indeed made one marvel at ceaselessly, but at this moment, the most shocking thing to Ghost Li was not these. Instead, on the Buddhist dignified sacred grounds, there were numerous commoners traversing, countless holding incense sticks, kneeling praying, stairs public squares, inside and out the temple halls, joss sticks and candles inconceivably burning at its peak. Such a big Tianyin temple, holding a lofty position among the world's good faction, was like a secular ordinary temple, open to numerous secular commoners to offer incense and worship Buddha. Ghost Lee never imagined this. He finally understood the jumble of strange sounds, but this before him made him even more confused. Growing up at Qingyun Hill since young, he had long accustomed to the so-called immortal home style, celestial mountain celestial environment. Originally only cultivated Taoists could possess it. On Qingyun Hill, where had he once seen an ordinary commoner come up to offer incense and beseech for their wishes? Ghost Lee looked towards Fa Xiang, asked in shock, "This?" Fa Xiang smiled and said, "Today happens to be first of the month, therefore there are much more people. Although our temple has many believers, but on usual days there are not that many people, just that every 1st and 15, the surrounding nearby commoners for several hundred miles, have the tradition of coming over to pray to Buddha." Ghost Lee shook his head, hesitated for a moment, eventually still asked, "No, I find it strange. Why would you all allow commoners to come in and offer incense to Buddha?" Fa Xiang seemed to expect this question from Ghost Lee. Nodded his head, gestured him to walk to a direction and then led Ghost Lee towards the back of the main hall, speaking while walking. Actually, in the past, Tianyin Temple, like Qingyun sect and the other great sects, did not open up to the secular world, just that my teacher Puhong Master, after taking over as the abbot, together with 3 other teacher uncles, comprehended the Buddha truth, made a big wish to Buddha, said, "Buddha is the people's Buddha, not one's own Buddha," and so decided to open the door to receive the commoners. Speaking till here, Fa Xiang stopped, turned and pointed to that innumerable stairs towards the great hall, said, "Did you see that long stairs of flight?" Ghost Lee nodded, said, "Why?" Fa Xiang clasped his hands together, said, "That was one of the teacher uncles who saw that the mountain road was precipitous. Although the commoners wanted to worship Buddha, but many were weak and in poor health, had difficulty getting around and couldn't come up the mountain to redeem their vows, in the end used remarkable powers, with his own strength, used 10 years of work, on the precipitous mountain road opened up this Buddha sea-level road, did such boundless beneficence charitable deed." Ghost Lee was filled with deep veneration, his expression also turned solemn, said, "There is actually such remarkable senior, may I know his title?" Fa Xiang glanced at him, unexpectedly was silent for a moment, quietly said, "That teacher uncle title was Puji, had already passed away for several years." Ghost Lee's body abruptly froze. Puji, these 2 words were like a shock of thunder in a clear sky, hit the back of his head, shook his heart and mind into pieces. Fa Xiang saw Ghost Lee's indefinite expression, a sudden sad, a sudden hatred, sighed long, quietly said, "Forget it, let's go, Abbot is still waiting for us." Ghost Lee woodenly followed Fa Xiang. His initial light footsteps, right now, had turned heavy. After walking for several zhang, he suddenly turned back, his expression complex, saw from far the crowd bustling about, countless people traversing that flight of stairs, elder, men, women, children, each with a devout expression walking up the stairs, their lips chanting Buddha names, as if walking past that road, they would be nearer to Buddha. Ghost Lee's expression was complicated, a pair of hands clenching into fists and slowly releasing. After a long while, eventually he slowly turned his head back, walked ahead. Fa Xiang, who was waiting in front with his palms clasped together and chanting, did not say much. The 2 of them walked off, leaving this silent road of Buddha and the innumerable believers behind them, in the secular world. Here was the mortal world, and not a mortal home Buddha realm. Walking past the main hall, there was a long cluster of temple buildings and halls at the back. Tianyin Temple was after all a famous great sect, its imposing facade was incomparable to an ordinary temple. Fa Xiang led Ghost Lee to the back, did not stop at any of the temple buildings, continued to head to the rear of the mountain. Ghost Lee only followed behind Fa Xiang, taciturn, his face revealed his heavy thoughts, the surrounding magnificent and exquisite architectures, he turned a blind eye to it. Just that at the end, Fa Xiang brought him out of Tianyin Temple back door, walked to a small mountain path heading towards Mount Meru. Ghost Lee frowned, said, "Why, Puhong Master is not in the temple?" Fa Xiang nodded, said, "That's right, although our temple is open to the secular world, it is an act of boundless beneficence, but monks after all need peace and quiet. Teacher and a few teacher uncles are all people who prefer peace, have always stay in a small temple at the summit. We usually refer to it as Little Tianyin Temple." Speaking, he smiled, revealed 2 rows of white teeth. Ghost Lee nodded silently, did not speak any more, followed Fa Xiang towards Mount Meru summit. Mount Meru, although was not that towering into the clouds like Qingyun sect Tongtian Peak, but it was definitely not low. They were already at mid-mountain when they came out from Tianyin Temple, Walking up they walked for a total of 1 hour before reaching Little Tianyin Temple inscribed board. Looking from the outside, Little Tianyin Temple was really little. At most Sanjinyuanzi translators note, 2 Chinese quadrangles residence with an additional smaller courtyard and rooms behind the main building. It was really far off from that grand Tianyin Temple at mid-mountain, however here it was away from the secular world. The surroundings were dark green pine trees and tall bamboos, densely forming a forest. When the mountain breeze blew past, pine trees moved and the bamboos swayed, an inexplicable feeling of quiet, seclusion and elegant. Compared to the bustling below, it was another flavor. Ghost Lee had just recovered from a serious injury. After walking so much, his forehead was already sweating slightly. He stopped to rest temporarily, turning his head back to look, saw the flourishing incense smoke from Tianyin Temple, thread-like drifting up. Even at such distance, he could see clearly, the indistinct human hubbub, an indescribable devotion and solemn feeling. Ghost Lee gazed for a while, staring in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. After a long time he turned over. Fa Shang nodded, brought him into Little Tianyin Temple. Here was much simpler. Both of them passed through the middle prayer hall, turned right and made 2 turns and it was 3 meditation rooms. Fa Shang walked up, facing the middle room entrance, loudly said, "Teacher, Zhang Xiaofan patron is already here." An aged and kindly voice immediately rang out, "Please come in." Fa Shang turned his head back, made a please gesture to Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee hesitated a moment then headed to that room, saw Fa Shang instead stopped outside, did not look like he was entering with him. Walking into the meditation room, Ghost Lee glanced around. The room was simple and unadorned, the furnishings were almost exactly like the room he had. And the current world's good faction giant pillar, Tianyin Temple in charge Abbot Puhong Master, sitting cross-legged on the meditation bed, his hand holding a string of prayer beads, his face smiling and looking at him. "You are here." Puhong Master's voice was calm, smiling. For some reason, facing this holy monk, Ghost Lee's wavering feelings very quickly calmed down. He inhaled deeply, nodded and said, "Yes." Puhong Master carefully assessed him, from top to bottom looked carefully, his eyes twinkling with strange benevolence and glimmer. The prayer beads in his hand also rotated gently. After a long time, he said, "You should have questions for me." Ghost Lee immediately nodded. "That's right, I am puzzled. Why would Tianyin Temple risk falling out with Qingyun sect and save me, and, why did you all?" He asked in a hurry. He was also speaking extremely fast but he was only halfway when he stopped involuntarily. Puhong Master stretched out his right hand in midair, preventing him from continuing. Ghost Lee was perplexed, looked at Puhong Master. Puhong Master bowed his head and chanted, came down from the bed, stood up, facing Ghost Lee, said, "Before you ask me, I will first bring you to see someone." Ghost Lee was stunned, said, "See someone, who is it?" Puhong did not answer, only walked out, slowly speaking, "This person wanted to see you for a very long time, and I know, you too very much want to see him." Ghost Lee was shocked but subconsciously followed. For some reason, his palms sweated, his heartbeat suddenly quickened, as if before him, there was something that made him fear. Fa Shang had been sitting quietly outside the meditation room, saw in such a short time Puhong Master was already leading Ghost Lee out of the room. His expression did not change, only stepped back, stood aside. Puhong Master glanced at him, nodded, did not speak and led Ghost Lee to another direction, that was in the Sanjinyuanzi, the last courtyard, back facing a mountain wall. The upturned eaves in the temple building carved with auspicious animals, were a unique architecture regulation in ancient China. It contained extremely fine segregation rules, for the numbers from emperor to officials to ordinary households, all had detailed specification, not allowed to overstep the boundaries, if not it would be a crime of disrespect, enough to sentence one to death and exterminate the clan. The architecture of having 10 auspicious animals on the roof. Since ancient times, there was only one place in the entire China, it was Imperial Palace Hall of Supreme Harmony, in the world it was only one. Here is fiction, everyone just read it with amusement. 1st and 15th of the month offering incense and praying to Buddha. The extensive spread of Buddhism in China was rather prevalent. It was known as religious services, or Buddhist rituals, from Beijing Lama Temple until the South Fujian village's small temple, most were like that. From young watched maternal grandmother offered incense until older, until now it was still like that. When I wrote it, when I thought about this, I couldn't help but sigh with feelings. Chapter 180 Difficult to Cross Sea of Misery. The flat small courtyard was like the quadrangle residence outside, a house that was simply built against a mountain wall, a brick-paved small path in the middle, leading to the door, grasses decorated both sides. It looked like no one did a proper upkeep of the place, weeds overgrown in many places. And what was different from the meditation room outside was, on this house's door, a piece of rather thick heavy black curtain hung over it, and other than this door, there seemed not to be other windows or doors. Ghostly looked at this ordinary and common-looking small house. His throat suddenly felt dry, both of his hands involuntarily clenched tightly. He looked to Puhong Master but saw on Puhong's master's face, his expression also looked extremely complicated, like regret, like pain, hard to put it in words, and he was too, looking at that little door in a trance. For a moment, no one spoke, a period of silence, except from the grasses beside. Somewhere, low insects' cries were heard, not knowing what it was calling for. For a long time, Puhong Master gently sighed and said, "Let's go in." Ghostly's facial muscles twitched once, whispered, "All right." Puhong Master slowly walked up. He stretched his hand out and pulled open the curtain, a sound of "Jia" and pushed open the door. Faint sounds came from the rotor on the door, who knew how long it had been since someone pushed open this door, heavy and desolate. A burst of cold air suddenly rushed out from the house, despite Ghostly was still outside the door, but with this cold draft, even with his level of cultivation, he still could not help but shuddered. In this little room, it seemed like one of the coldest place on earth. Ghostly frowned, had some hesitation. At this moment, Puhong Master's voice was heard from behind the curtain, said, "Little patron, come on right in." Ghostly took a deep breath, shook his head, opened the curtains, straightened in. The curtains slowly fell. Once again the door issued a desolate sound of "Jia" gently closed. The small yard, again, resumed its peacefulness. Faxiong's figure slowly walked over from the front, looked at that plain house, softly chanted and bowed once, looking solemn and respectful. The curtains lowered, the wooden door closed, because there wasn't any windows, the house was immediately in darkness. The bone-penetrating chill instantly gushed over from all directions, like countless cold steel needles, stabbing into the flesh. Ghostly had just recovered from a major injury, for a moment started to shudder a few times again, but he was after all not an ordinary human. He circulated the true ways in his body and regulated his breathings, slowly adjusted. Although the cold was unable to seep into his body, but that icy cold bone-penetrating chill was still uncomfortable. This small house on Mount Meru was even colder than the inherently cold North Pole. Ghostly was shocked. While he was feeling bewildered, he heard Puhong Master quietly sighed and said, "Junior brother, we have come to visit you. This person, you must have wanted to see him for a very long time." His voice was deep and carried a strange emotion. The chill in the house abruptly went down a few degrees, almost could freeze a human's body blood. Then, a thread of weak light, white carrying faint silver light, slowly from ahead of Puhong Master and Ghostly, at the end of the small house, lighted up. That light was graceful and like snow. First the thread blossomed, then at the periphery of the light, another thread of silverish white faint light slowly shone, approaching it, merging into one. One by one threads of faint light started to light up one after another, gradually emerging, a 1 chi square-like disc shape. That light was gentle, pure white like snow. The light rose to a height less than 1 chi. At the end of it the light seemed to transform into bits of snowflake, like white fireflies, gently dancing, slowly descending, almost like an illusion. Then, the threads of light slowly merged, gradually became brighter. Ghostly and Puhong Master heard a light whistling sound. It was pleasing to the ear. The white light surged, instantly released its brilliance, illuminating the entire house. In that instant, Puhong Master chanted softly with his head bowed, and Ghostly, instead in that instant, felt his entire blood froze, unable to feel any warmth at all. Even his own heartbeat seemed to pause in that moment. He was like a frozen icicle standing there, staring in a daze deep into the light. There wasn't any other thoughts in his mind anymore, only two words reverberated. Puji. The weak light was like snow, brilliant and flowing, emitting from the disc pure white like jade, at the same time giving off an uncanny chill. And on top of that 1 chi square-like round disc, a person sat. It was that person who changed Zhang Xian Fan's life, the one whom Ghostly etched into his heart, Puji. Looking from afar, Puji's face was lifelike, although his skin looked extremely pale, without a single trace of life, but upon careful inspection, there wasn't any sign of shriveled flesh. Moreover, he was still like that compassionate and kind old monk in Zhang Xiaofan's memory, not a single change, just that in his expression there was an additional indistinct anguish. Other than his body, Puji's body for some reason, was half of his original size, and because it was so, he could sit cross-legged on that pure white jade disc. The chill in this room was assaulting, but there wasn't any ice scene placed around. Most likely it was because of this unusual treasure. And assuming that Puji's remains could be preserved for such a long time was most probably also due to this treasure's power. Just that Ghost Lee's mind couldn't think that much, the compassionate-looking monk sitting on the jade disc, was clearly the one etched deeply in his heart, for several years, never once forgotten. Was it hate? Was it gratitude? In his mind, for a moment it was empty, for a moment it was like a storm, thunder and lightning rumbled, thousands of anguish, 10,000s of resentment, all for a moment washed over his heart. That kind monk was the person who saved his life, the person who taught him the true way and treated him like a son, but it was also this compassionate-looking monk, destroyed his entire life, made him suffer day and night, like falling into the hell's abyss. Gratitude, resentment intertwined. Initially he thought it was only in his heart. Unexpectedly today this moment, he could see his face once again. Ghost Lee under agitated emotions, could barely stand straight, his head swam, his body fell to the side. At this moment, a gentle and warm hand stretched out from beside, supported him, at the same time a familiar energy, it was Buddhist true way great Brahman wisdom, traveled from that hand, deep and profound, slowly calmed Ghost Lee's heart which was filled with agitated blood. Amitabha Buddha, little patron, do not be too agitated, your health is more important. Puhong Master's calm voice, softly heard beside. Ghost Lee, like being shook awake, clenched his teeth, took a deep breath, released Puhong's hand and stood straight once again, but then his eyes never once left Puji's face. In the faint light, Puji's kind face, that trace of anguish, seemed deeper. Puhong Master beside, carefully assessed Ghost Lee. In his eyes, this young man's indefinite expression due to his current pain, fluctuated in the faint light. Right now this moment, Ghost Lee was not that renowned world's evil sect sorcerer, instead was an ordinary person to him, like that young man many years ago. He gently sighed, his eyes deep, turned and looked at Puji ahead, slowly went up, staring at Puji's face, quietly said, "Junior brother, your last wish, senior brother me has already fulfilled it for you. Senior brother is useless, unable to save you then. Evil cause results in evil consequence, your own debts you need to experience yourself. This was what you said at that time, hope you will let go of your previous life sin soon, reincarnate and head to the afterlife." Amitabha. He clasped his palms together at Puji's remains, bowed and then walked straight out. Before he walked out of the door, he faintly said, "Little patron, I think you will want to be alone with Puji junior brother for a while. I will be in that mediation room ahead, if you need anything, just come look for me." Ghost Lee did not speak, almost like turning a deaf ear. Right now in his eyes, there was only Puji monk in that faint light. Puhong Master sighed, pulled out the door and lifted the curtain, walked out. The house, shrouded in a blanket of stillness. Ghost Lee slowly moved his feet, little by little walked towards Puji. He seemed to fear something, somehow at lost. Clearly he was once gnashing his teeth in bitter hatred, but for some reason, this moment, his heart was pouring with infinite sorrow. That person was quietly sitting there, without any life, but as if he was waiting for something. Even his face with anguish seemed to have a desire and anticipation. Ghost Lee slowly walked to him, staring at Puji, both hands clenching tightly, his nails deeply entrenched into his flesh, but in the end he still released them. Almost like losing his support, his body strengthless, like that, quietly fell sitting onto the floor, sat before Puji, silent. The faint light glimmered, illuminating Puji and him, both of their figures. Time seemed to pause in this house, time flowed back at times, jumped at times, but eventually what remained unchanged were their hearts. Even though one was still beating, another already still. Dong, 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 dong. The morning bell, once again tolled, reverberated in every corner of Mount Meru, rising and falling, awakening one from dreams but also had a kind of effect which could bring one away from the secular world. Mount Meru summit, Little Tianyin Temple, outside the quiet meditation room, knocking sounds on the door were heard. Puhong Master raised his eyebrows and then slightly shook his head, sighed and said, "Is it Fa Shang? Come on in." Fa Shang acknowledged and went in, walked over and bowed to Puhong Master, looking at his face, there seemed to be a trace of worry, said, "Teacher, it is already an entire day and night, Zhang patron still has not emerged." Puhong Master shook his head, said, "Previous life ill-fated relationship, a lifetime of feelings and enmity, how can it be so easily accepted and let go?" Fa Shang clasped his palms together, quietly said, "Yes." Then frowned, said, "Teacher, I am worried about the jade ice disc in the house, although it can protect and preserve Puji teacher uncle's body to be immortal, but the cold energy is greatly detrimental to humans. And Zhang patron he has just recovered, his mind and heart are in pain and confusion. What if his condition leaves any incompletely cured illness? How would we live up to Puji teacher uncle's final instructions? Puhong master faintly said, "It's all right, I have already used great Brahman wisdom to protect his heart yesterday. Moreover, with his own cultivation level, although the cold energy is poisonous, I presume it would not be a problem." Fa Shang heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing it, clasped his hands together. "So that's how it is." Disciple is also relieved. Puhong master nodded, at the same time glanced at Fa Shang, said, "I see that you are very concerned about this Zhang patron, although your Puji teacher uncle had left his last wishes, but as for yourself, seem to view him differently too." Fa Shang smiled and said, "Teacher has exceptional insight, it is indeed so." Speaking, he seemed to recall the past, sighed and said, "Frankly, ever since I first saw Zhang patron until today, it has been, like the blink of an eye, 10 years. For 10 years, disciples' Buddhist studies and training might have small improvement, compared to one's lifetime it is like an infant learning to walk, hardly any changes. Only this Zhang patron, looking at his life, a stormy sea, one climax after another, great sorrows and hardships, gratitude, grievances, affections, enmities, the various sufferings mentioned by Buddha, each was experienced fully by him." Puhong master's countenance changed slightly, clasped his palms together and chanted softly. Fa Shang continued, "Disciple also once thought about this Zhang patron during the late nights before sleep, also placed myself in his shoes, tried to imagine the various sufferings on disciple's own self. Unfortunately, disciple's Buddhist studies eventually is still meager, actually was terrified and had fear. Buddha said the conscious mind world is after all a bag of skin, in the end merely dust, only this path of the heart, the importance is to comprehend." Each time disciple thought of this, recalled Zhang patron's rough life, and today he is still able to sustain on persistently, disciple honestly admires. Speaking till here, Faxiong's expression suddenly changed, kneeled before Puhong master. Puhong master was stunned, said, "What is this for?" Fa Shang quietly said, "Teacher, disciple's cultivation is low, unable to comprehend the Buddhist Dharma fully, and yet towards Zhang patron, this kind of figure who agonizes over the demons in his heart, disciple really can't bear to beseech teacher to use your remarkable ability, with our Buddha boundless power, enlighten and show him the direction, with Buddhist mercifulness transform his evil tendencies, make him leave the demons in his heart and the sea of misery. This is also a great merit, fulfill the above heaven's benevolent heart, console below deceased Puji teacher uncle. Teacher have mercy." Speaking, he lay prostrate with both hands, bowed 3 times in succession. Puhong master shook his head and sighed, heaving a long sigh, said, "Foolish child. Foolish child, do you know with your words, you have instead violated anger taboo. Furthermore, it is not that teacher is unwilling to enlighten this person, it is because he has experienced many hardships, a life of rough bumps, to this present day, his heart is already as firm as a boulder, not like an ordinary person whose heart can be moved. As what is said, Buddha in one's heart, each and every living creatures have affinity with Buddha, in the future whether it is to degenerate into the sea of misery, or return to paradise, all is but a single thought in his heart, I and the rest do not have any more power to exert on him." Fa Shang slowly stood up, bowed his head low and clasped his palms together, his face couldn't help but reveal disappointment, however he quietly said, "Yes, disciple understands." Puhong after a moment of silence, said, "You better go to the rear house and take a look at him, although the cold energy shouldn't be a problem, but with his current condition, sustaining without water and food for a day, it is still not a good thing." Fa Shang acknowledged, composed himself, headed out. When he was about to open the door and go out, someone was already outside the door. Sunlight shone from the person's back, the person's face cast in the shadows, for a moment unable to see clearly. Fa Shang was surprised, took a step back and could then see clearly it was Ghostly who had unknowingly arrived at the doorstep of the house, quietly standing. Not seen for a day, Ghostly did not seem tired, but his face was extremely pale, his eyes bloodshot, most probably he did not once sleep for the whole night. When he saw Fa Shang, Ghostly's lips moved, slowly nodded to Fa Shang. Fa Shang was stunned, clasped his palms in return. Ghostly then slowly walked in, stood before Puhong master. Puhong master, like yesterday, sat cross-legged on the meditation bed, his hands holding the prayer beads, continuously rotating. When he saw Ghostly looked like he had words to say, he was not surprised, indifferently spoke to Fa Shang, "Bring a chair for little patron, and, you two sit down." Fa Shang acknowledged, pulled a chair over for Ghostly, he himself sat at one side. Puhong Master was silent for a moment, said, whatever question that you wish to ask me, just go ahead and say. Ghost Li's eyes seemed undecided, as if his heart until now was still in turmoil. After a long time, he was heard quietly speaking, why did Tianyin Temple save me? Puhong clasped his palms together, said, all things have consequences and each consequence has their cause. Patron Current's rough situation, mostly are due to evil consequences planted by Tianyin Temple Puji Jr. Brother. Since it is so, Tianyin Temple cannot leave you in the lurch. Ghost Li snorted, said, what you all did, aren't you afraid Qingyun sect will fall out with you? Puhong Master smiled and said, afraid. Ghost Li heard his honest reply, was instead surprised, said, then you still. Puhong Master shook his head and said, Tianyin Temple for generations has good relations with Qingyun sect. Our ancestors have too sternly admonished not to destroy without considerations. That was why I instructed them to dress in black, without revealing any traces and bring you back. Ghost Li sneered, Qingyun sect is full of highly skilled martial artists, what if your tracks were exposed? Puhong Master indifferently said, I ordered them to hide their tracks, is for the friendship between the two sects, unwilling to create discord between the two good faction sects, that was why we had that strategy. But if there really was a mishap, then it wouldn't matter too, to save Patron Yu, we have no choice but to fall out with them. Ghost Li stared at Puhong Master, in a heavy voice said, what exactly is the reason, for all of you to disregard everything and save me? Puhong Master this time, turned silent instead. Ghost Li did not pursue the question, only stared at him. After a long time, Puhong Master gave a long sigh, said, do you wish to know, the incident which happened after Puji Jr. Brother struggled to return to Tianyin Temple with his last breath until he passed away? Ghost Li was shocked, for a moment speechless, looking at the pain in his eyes. It seemed like his heart was in another turmoil. Finally, he quietly said, yes. For some reason, his voice was somehow hoarse.